acting director, and I will be calling this meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock on January 10th. I believe we have a quorum. Can we start by calling roll? Carolyn?
Yes. Mr. Missile, Mr. Missile,
Carolyn, can you please call roll?
yes. Mr. Missile, Mr. Missile,
Aye, here.
Miss Firehawk,
Present.
Mr. Carazana,
Here.
Mr. Bivens, Mr. Murray,
Here.
Mr. Claiborne.
Here.
Thank you.
It appears we have a quorum. I am opening this meeting because this is our organizational meeting, and we will begin by electing a chair for this meeting. Other matters not listed on the agenda from the public. I believe we do start with that, sorry. Are there matters from the public that anyone would like to comment on or present that are not on the agenda this evening? Carolyn, do you have anyone online?
No, I do not. No, I do not.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we'll close the matters not listed on the agenda from the public, and we will begin with the election of officers. Can I also note that Chairman Bivens has arrived in
Former chair. Former chair.
Commissioner Bivens, my apologies. My apologies. Commissioner Bivens has arrived and is now present. So we have a full slate of commissioners.
You got her.
So I will go ahead and start by opening up a request for nominations for the chair for the Albemarle County Planning Commission for 2023. Do I have any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Corey Claiborne for Chair of the Albemarle County Planning Commission.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations?
I move we close the nomination for chair.
Mr. Bivens, would your motion also be to elect Mr. Claiborne as the chair?
That would exactly be it.
Thank you. We have a motion to elect Commissioner Claiborne as chair. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Carolyn, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Miss Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Missile.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will now turn the rest of this meeting over to Chairman Claiborne to complete the rest of the meeting. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. I hope I don't let anyone down. Thank you for your confidence. And I do want to take a moment to just express gratitude to each of my commissioners. This is my 4th year. So I'm coming into my 4th year. And I remember learning a lot from former Chairman Bivens, as well as former Chairman Firehawk and others along the way. And I just ask that you make sure I stay on the straight and narrow this year as we do that. And also want to thank staff for always making us look good for the preparations that come in, day out, and to our council who also keeps us out of jail. So thank you to everyone as we look forward to doing this great work together in 23. And I particularly want to thank you, Ms. Firehawk, for your leadership. And I was talking to staff before the meeting, as I would love to find a more formal way to show that appreciation besides these words here. So more to come on that. So you will be recognized more formally. Maybe, but
Thank you.
yep.
It's been an honor to serve the past year.
Indeed. So I think it's now time to elect a vice chair. So I would like to ask if there's any nominations from the floor.
Chair, I would put forward our esteemed colleague Fred Missel for the role of vice chair for this coming year, please.
Thank you. Any other nominations? Is there a motion to close the nominations and elect future vice chair, Mr. Missel?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any further discussion? All right, hearing none, Madam Clerk, could we call the roll?
Yes, I sure will. Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Missile.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
All right. And Vice Chair Missile, I'm looking forward to serving with you. So,
Likewise, sir. Thank you.
it's in your way. All right, as we get situated, I think we can move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is discussion of the Planning Commission rules of procedure. So I'll ask for Mr. McDermott to present the proposed changes.
Thank you. There are no changes proposed to the rules of procedure from what we were operating under last year. These are standard. I'm happy to take any questions unless Mr. Herrick has anything to add. I think that's all we need to say.
All right, thank you. Any discussion from the commission on the proposed rules of procedure?
I had a question, and this is basic, I think this is for council. So we have under the types of attendance piece that we have sort of higher up, and then we have that separate piece about what is that being called, telephonic or online? Would it not be helpful to incorporate that farther up in our rules of procedure as opposed to having it sit several pages or several lines after that?
Yeah, we certainly could rearrange the order. We adopted the remote participation policy just very recently. Happy to rearrange if the commission sees need to.
But my only reason for pushing that before us is that then sort of continues the sweep of how we meet. And so we have that one, we have how we meet and who can be here and who cannot be here. And then we have that remote piece, which I think is sort of towards the end as it was adopted. And I think just for everyone's clarity to push that up top might be more helpful if we could do that, if we could agree to do that.
Any objections from the commission to Commissioner Bivens' suggestion?
Commissioner Bivens, could you clarify exactly where you would want that to fall in the order? Because I'm looking through the rules right now and I'm not seeing exactly where else that would go.
Right. So at the very top, I think you have how we meet, so when we meet. And then number 7, so it's closer to, keep going minutes, keep going. Around the quorum and voting procedures, because really you're talking about the mechanics of the meeting there. And I think it probably to switch it with communication with the Board of Visitors, with the Board of Supervisors. Just flip that paragraph.
Okay, so you're suggesting that remote participation policy be moved up to number 6 and that communication with board supervisors be moved down to number 7.
Correct. Because then you have all about meetings in one place. Thanks. Makes sense.
Hearing no objections, is there a motion to adopt the rules as presented with the amendment? So moved. Second,
A second?
any further discussion? All right, hearing none, Madam Clerk, can we call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Yes.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
and Mr. Bivens.
All right, moving on to item number 5 on the docket, discussion of committees, boards, bodies to which commission members serve as liaisons. And so I'll ask Mr. McDermott to present a brief overview.
Yes, thank you. In the commissioner's packet, you did receive a list of the various committee memberships that are appointed by the commission. I also did put a version on each of your tables that shows the time and frequency of those meetings so that you're aware of that. We do have a number of vacant openings right now. And so what we'd like to do is see if we could get some appointments or volunteers to serve on the vacant ones. And then it's up to the commissioners if they want to change committees on any of the ones that are not location based. So I'll leave that up to the chair to work through.
All right, thank you. I'd like to maybe try to bring some structure to this conversation, because I think this is one that can get circular really quick if we're not careful. I do want to thank staff for putting the additional handout there, which starts to speak to the requirements, right? It's almost like a mini job description, right? So how often does this group meet? How long do they meet? If they meet during the middle of the workday, I think almost all of us are working. If you're retired, that's still work, right? So that'll help maybe shape some of the discussion here. So maybe we could start with the vacant ones first. And if you look here, it looks like there's 3 vacant ones. There is the ACEA, the Albemarle Conservation Easement Authority, the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee Liaison, CTAC, and then the last one at the very bottom of your list here is AC 44 Comp Plan Work Group Meeting Liaison. And perhaps maybe the best way to do this is maybe just work around the dais and you can comment on whether you want to keep your assignment, trade it, take a vacant one, and then see how it shakes out as step number 1, if that sounds okay. So. All right, well, Commissioner Bivens, can I start with you?
Sure, absolutely, Chair. So the one that I might suggest, I will do 2 things. I'm not sure if the Long Range School Planning Commission or committee is still in existence. I've got an email out to them and I don't know that answer. So that may be one that comes off, and depending on what Kevin sort of finds out from that. And then I will just sort of put in a point. I don't know when the second phase of the comp plan working group committee might be, but I would recommend that someone step into that role. I did it the first round, and for no other reason, I think it's actually good for us to be in the room as sort of ex official members, not participating unless there's a passionate need to sort of participate because the committee is there, but I would suggest that somebody do that. And other than that, Chair, I think I'm good holding on to the ones that are still remaining attached to the ones that I'm on right now, unless somebody has a pressing need to, or has a desire, I should say, a pressing desire to sort of move into one of those.
All right, thank you. I don't see anyone jumping on you to take anything from you, so I think you're probably okay. Commissioner Curzon, we go to you.
So I'm actually interested in both the CTAC or that comprehensive plan meeting, depending on how things, I mean, certainly that the transportation one is one that I would be interested in filling in. If no one's interested in the comprehensive plan, I would take that as well.
Do you take both of those? How about the one that you currently hold? Are you looking to give that up or keep?
I'll keep that for now.
You the man.
It's unofficial.
Wow. All right. All right, Mr. Missile.
Thank you. I will take an opposite approach and just stay with what I have. At this point, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with the exception of, and the reason is that LUPAC, Commissioner Bivens and I both sort of are on LUPAC for different reasons. You as the planning commission member, but it is something that I attend. And I think the Village of Rivanna Community Advisory Committee is likely, well, we haven't met for quite some time, and I'm not sure if they're likely to meet moving forward. So unless there's a vacancy once we get to the end still, I'm content with where I am.
Thank you, sir. All right, Commissioner Firehawk.
I'm happy to keep the ones I have. I'll just note that ACE is essentially disbanded. It has not met for several years.
The ACEA? one?
Yeah.
Oh.
The Acquisition of Conservation Easements Committee.
I wondered about that.
It,
Oh.
and there's been no movement by the Board of Supervisors to reconvene it
Hmm.
in any way. So it doesn't really count as on my burden, if you will, of then similarly, the Capital Improvement Program Oversight Committee was I don't know how to say this, told not meeting for this past year by the Board of Supervisors. They decided not to have it. So it's very unclear to me whether that will come back. I can keep my name in the hat should it come back. I actually thought budgeting was fun. Let's see, then, the only other thing that and historic preservation actually has not been able to meet for 5 months. They've not been able to achieve a quorum, and we've had 2 resignations since then. So I don't even know that we have enough bodies to make a quorum. So that's something that needs to be addressed, because that's a really important committee for the comprehensive plan to be able to do what they do. So anyway, those were more statements about fact of the committees. I am kind of a comprehensive planning junkie. I love comprehensive planning, so I would be happy to do that, but I don't have to. I also have a difficult business schedule. So I don't know when they meet. So that's, I guess, part of the challenge is 3 times in the evening, but which evenings? So.
Is it fair to say that we can attend any of those, even though we have a liaison appointed?
As long as there's only 2, yeah.
Okay. Otherwise it'd be a
Yeah, so
meeting,
maybe
right?
Luis would take it and I would just attend if I was in town.
Okay.
Yes,
thing.
maybe we can tag team because if, depending on, that was I was gonna thank you for
Yeah.
bringing that up. Well, that may be the only, I think there's a couple others that I saw that didn't have
Like they don't have a set time, so
they
it's
don't have
hard
a
to
set
know.
time, so
Right.
given work schedules, whether or not I could actually make it or not, I don't know.
Okay, well, you can be the rep and I'll be your
Yeah.
your tag
We can
friend.
figure it out.
All right.
So just mentioned, I also serve on the Albemarle County Natural Heritage Committee, and I believe you have in the past as well.
I was appointed as a liaison to that committee for a while from the planning commission. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I would recommend we put that back on this list if no one has an issue with that.
I think the board has to decide that there are liaisons from the planning commission to serve on committee. And so the board had made that decision. And then they decided that it was no longer necessary to have that liaison position.
Huh.
I think it was because the reason they decided to have it was because the group was getting ready was going to finish their report. And so they wanted the planning commission to have more communication with that group. But then the report is finished, so I think the board decided we didn't need to have an appointed person. So you would need to, well, our chair could ask the board of supervisors if we could re-up that liaison relationship, but he probably would need to write something about why you wanted to do that.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend if we feel that strongly about it. If we have to write up a proposal. I mean, staff, do you have any further advice on that?
I'd just point out that I think Commissioner Firehawk is correct. That would have to come as a board directive if we were going to appoint a liaison to that committee.
And just a note of caution, the board has noted that they feel the county has too many committees. And they're actually looking for opportunities to condense, collapse, maybe make some meet less frequently.
Mhm.
I don't know if any they're planning to disband, but yeah, their mood is to have less meetings and less committees, so.
And I'll reiterate, nothing stops you from just attending a meeting if you want to, sit in and learn without
And
having
coming
that
back and
formal
sharing what you-
connection.
You know.
So, which might be the most appropriate way forward. Mr. Murray, last one standing. So there is a vacancy. It's the ACEA, Albemarle Conservation Easement Authority, if that is of interest. But
I believe as Karen said, is that still an active?
I think she was mentioning ACE, the
Yeah.
first one.
Oh,
The
okay. I mean,
second one from the top, yeah. I know it's
I
confusing.
would be, yeah, I would be interested in that.
Thank you, Commissioner Murray. Just taking notes here. So perhaps I'll just kind of recap for the record and then we can move to vote. But the changes that I have here to the list before us is with ACEA is Commissioner Murray. I have CTAC, the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee, is Luis or Commissioner Carazana. I have same for the, where's my notes? Commissioner Carazana, help me out. AC 44.
Comprehensive Plan
Yeah.
Working Group.
AC
Yeah.
44. And so those were the only modifications I have to this list. Does that match everyone's notes? Okay. All right. Is there a motion to adopt these appointments?
I'll move that we adopt those revised appointments.
There's a second.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? No? All right. Hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you call for the roll?
Yes, Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana.
Aye.
Mr. Bivens.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On to item number 6, review and adopt meeting schedule for 2023. Mr. McDermott, could we have your overview?
Yes, thank you. Your schedule of meetings is included in the packet. I would like to note one change that we will have to make to that. It does list December 26th as a potential meeting date, which would be a holiday. And I would suggest that maybe we move that up 1 week to the December 18th date, so that we can continue to have an extra, or December 19th, excuse me, December 19th meeting, so that we can continue to have a second meeting in December. Of course, at any point in time, if there's not items that we need to cover, we can cancel meetings. However, we often do have full slates, so having that second one on there, I think would be good. And I just want to clarify, because I did hear the confusion. When you see the list of meeting dates in this, the work sessions are also opportunities for public hearings. So despite the fact that those dates aren't listed in the public hearing column, those are there would be public hearings that could be scheduled on those evenings. So I wanted to clarify that for you.
Oh, Chair, I thought we had a late or an epiphany gift on that. And hopefully we'll have a chance to speak to the duality of the roles that we're being asked to play when we have both a work session around something that asks us to look forward and to do a different type of analysis and intellectual exchange than when we're looking at public hearings, which we're really working within the confines of zoning, of comp plans, and of land use. And so that's a very constrained, not in a negative way, but it's a very focused kind of work, where the work we've been doing when we have work sessions, when we're looking at zoning and we're looking at land use, that's future casting. And while I know some of you are still engaged in that kind of work on a daily basis, some of us who perhaps are future casting in different ways have to sort of shift our brains to sort of be able to do those two very different types of work on the same evening. That's just the musings at this time.
I appreciate that. Any other comments on the schedule, regarding the schedule? Sorry, Mr. Missile, were you about to say something?
No, sir.
Oh, gotcha.
Nope.
One thing I might add, and similar to what we did last year, is that I would ask that we all look at our business calendars. Some of us have business travel that kind of creeps up and maybe look 6 months out. And to see if any conflicts that you have with your business schedule arise with the planning commission meeting schedules, and letting Kevin know as soon as possible so we can make sure we have a quorum for the public hearings that are being booked. Is that something we could all agree to? Sound reasonable?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. Is there a motion to adopt this presented schedule as amended by staff regarding that December 26th date?
So moved.
There's a second.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Yes, can I also ask you all to let me know as well as Kevin when you're going to not be at a meeting? That way we both know what's going on always.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Bivens.
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Missile.
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Miss Firehawk,
Aye.
and Mr. Murray.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. On to the consent agenda, which you will see on the next sheet, and it consists of 2 sets of meetings, both from November, the 22nd and the 29th. Does any commissioner want to pull anything from the consent agenda? Okay, if not, is there a motion to accept or approve the consent agenda?
Motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Miss Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Murray.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, the consent agenda has been adopted, and now we're on to our public hearings, of which we have 3 tonight. And so the first one is CCP 2022-00001 Botanical Garden of the Piedmont. Thank you. McIntyre Park. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff for a staff report.
You. There we go. Thank you. I'm David Benish, Development Process Manager with Community Development Department. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to start out by giving you some background information about the compliance review process, since this is an item that you don't see as frequently. But this is a proposal to establish a botanical garden on a portion of the city's McIntyre Park property. It's about 14 plus acres in McIntyre Park. About 3 acres of that lies within the county. The rest is within city proper. The proposed activity is considered a public use that's been determined by our zoning administrator. Public uses are permitted by right in all zoning districts. However, if the proposed public use is not identified in a comprehensive plan, a review for the proposal's compliance with the comprehensive plan is required, and that's a state code requirement, the citation of which is on the screen. CCP determines if the location, character, and extent of a facility is in substantial accord with the comprehensive plan. The county staff reviews the proposal and makes a recommendation on that finding to the planning commission. And the planning commission acts on the proposal by either finding it in substantial accord or not. The commission's action really is focused in on the consistency of the proposed location of the use to the comp plan. It is not in and of itself a recommendation of whether the facility should be built or not. That comment's actually more relevant when it's a county facility. That's a decision ultimately with the board, but this is focused in on whether the location and character is consistent with the recommendations of the plan, and that's the limits of the review. No action is required of the Board of Supervisors. However, the finding is forwarded to the Board of Supervisors. They do have the option to come to a different conclusion. They seldom do, but there is no required action from the board after this date. A little bit more on specifics of this proposal, and the applicant has a very good presentation, so I'm going to try to be as brief as I can here. The Botanical Garden of the Piedmont Organization has entered into a 40-year lease with the city of Charlottesville to construct the Botanical Garden. Again, it's on, I believe, 14.7 acres of land in McIntyre Park, and 3 of those are in Albemarle County. The specific site you can see here on the map is 950 Melbourne Road. It's the southwest corner of the intersection of Melbourne Road and the John Warner Parkway. You can see that what is the sort of salmonish color plus the left side of the highlighted yellow constitutes a general area for the Botanical Garden. The actual portion or parcel in the county was actually split by John Warner Parkway. The only part of that total parcel is the portion west of John Warner Parkway, where I have the red lettering. This is an aerial view of the vicinity, which gives you a little bit better picture of the surrounding uses, which is primarily public and institutional uses. The Norfolk Southern Railroad is due west, and west of that is Charlottesville High School. To the north is the high school ball fields, the football, I believe it's the women's softball field and practice facility. There's also a Parks and Recreation building located there. And John Warner Parkway Linear Park runs along the John Warner Parkway, both south, west, east, and north of this site. And obviously to the south is the rest of McIntyre Park. Again, the red outline is the general location for the total facility. The components of the proposal, it's an emission-free facility. It will be open, it's projected to be open 9 to 6 o'clock AM to PM, except for some major events. They anticipate 4 annual events. Those are important for revenue raising purposes since it's otherwise an admission-free facility. There are the facilities being proposed and buildings. Obviously, there are gardens, but besides the gardens, there'll be a visitor center, a garden pavilion, which is a small building meeting space, an amphitheater, a main event green, and 1 main parking area. You may note that on the attachment of the staff report, there was additional information about potential overflow parking areas that don't show up on this diagram, which is a general overview of the proposal. In terms of the recommendations in our comprehensive plan, the land use plan or the Places 29 master plan, land use plan, and Parks and Green Systems plan both recommend uses that are parks and open space and parks and green, public open space and parks and public open space. It's slightly different designations, essentially the same for both. Those designations recognize the fact that this land is part of McIntyre Park and that park activities would occur and enhancements may occur in the future. In terms of the assessment of the character and extent of the proposal, the proposed open space, passive recreation, and civic uses that are proposed by this facility are consistent with the uses that are recommended for lands designated for parks and public open space use. We see botanical gardens as a feature not uncommon to public parks. And it's consistent with the city's East McIntyre Park Master Plan. And although that plan is not part of the county's plan, it did play into the baseline designations for this area as public parks and open space. The character and extent of the activities and surrounding uses are consistent. They are mostly public uses or institutional uses, as we noted before, the high school, John Warner Parkway Park. Those adjacent uses also provide some supporting service opportunities, including opportunities for overflow parking as one example. And Melbourne Road provides additional on-street parking that can be used if necessary during peak periods. This proposal was reviewed by transportation planning staff and entrance corridor staff. No major issues were defined. Availability for parking for major events was one of the issues that was inquired about, and that's why there's some additional information about that available parking. We do advise that that there is coordination of activities and events with Charlottesville High School. I believe the applicant has already started that process and understands that, but that we do think that's an important thing to occur moving forward. So staff finds that the location, character, and extent of the proposed public facility is consistent with the county's comprehensive plan and the Places 29 master plan, and it's consistent with the city's planning for the East McIntyre Park area. We did not find any unfavorable factors as it relates to consistency with the comprehensive plan. So we recommend that you do find the location, character, and extent of the, excuse me, I clipped in the wrong recommendation, sorry. But that this proposal be found consistent with the comprehensive plan. You could use number 1 here. Answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Benish. Any questions for staff? No? All right, well, hearing none, we'll open the public hearing for this. And with that, I would ask for the applicant to please come up and deliver their presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jill Trishman Marks. I am the Executive Director of the Botanical Garden of the Piedmont. And I appreciate this opportunity to tell you about what's been going on at the Botanical Garden recently and our plans for the future. So I just want to make sure I've got this working okay. Sorry, where on my screen should I be? Ah, there we are. Advancing. There we go. Sorry. The mission of the Botanical Garden of the Piedmont is to welcome all community members and visitors to engage in nature, to inspire learning through the beauty and importance of plants, to advance sustainability, and to promote human and environmental well-being. The garden is being planned as a place for everyone to learn, play, explore, relax, and gather. The garden will be a community asset that's open to the public year-round and will combine accessible outdoor community garden rooms and interior garden spaces. This is a survey of the site, and as Mr. Benish already explained, let's see if you can see this, might be too far away. The Botanical Garden is owned by the city of Charlottesville, but some of the land in the county. And the red asterisk indicates the area of the 3 acres that are within the boundaries of Albemarle County.
We can see your mouse too, if you want to point using.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Fred. To give you a little more context, we have got the John Warner Parkway, Melbourne Road, the railroad, and then this stream right here are the boundaries for the Botanical Garden. The area right here with the red asterisk is the county area. Across Melbourne Road is the Parks and Rec landscape shed for the city of Charlottesville, Charlottesville High School football stadium. On the other side of the railroad tracks is Charlottesville High School itself. And then, of course, on the other side of Melbourne Road are the trails along the parkway that go from Route 250 all the way up to K-Tech. Our schematic plan and the features were designed through a series of public input sessions in 2018. Recently, we revised our master plan in order to accommodate the additional acreage that we got as part of the land lease process. But we also changed it to accommodate the stream restoration that's about to begin, as well as the spur of the Ravenna Trail that goes through the site and the bridge that the city will be building shortly. Although we've made those changes, none of the other public input that was part of the design of the schematic plan was altered. Our lease agreement with the city requires that there is no admission fee to the garden. Therefore, the large garden spaces, specifically the main event green right here and the amphitheater, are vital to sustaining the garden financially. The garden will also include smaller areas to serve as outdoor classrooms for exploration and learning, such as our children's discovery garden here, our aquatics garden, and then across the stream, our tree canopy walk. There will also be less programmed, more contemplative garden spaces. For example, our meadow that will include native wildflowers and grasses, our healing and contemplative gardens, our moss, mushroom, and fern gardens. We will have a pinetum, which is a collection of native conifers, as well as a flowering grove and native trails. The area that will be developed in Albemarle County land includes our children's discovery area, our parking lot, and our garden pavilion. These are also the garden features that we plan to be the first phase of the construction of the garden. We have not hired an architect yet. So in fact, we are going to be having architects come to the Charlottesville area in 2 weeks to in response to our RFP. So everything that I'm talking about buildings right now is just it's very early days. What we do know is that we will have a visitor center, which will house our meeting rooms, offices, and as well as catering facilities, perhaps a cafe, exhibit space. We will have the garden pavilion, which we're planning as a 3-season event space with bathrooms, a service shed, which will house all of the programming materials for our children's discovery garden, and our maintenance shed, which will be the home of our tools and equipment that we'll use for maintaining the garden. Again, the images that I'm showing you now about our architecture, it's very early days. We don't have an architect, but this is what the community responded to. And so it gives you an idea of the spirit of the architecture for this site. The other requirement of the city was that we are able to accommodate bus parking. So currently our parking lot provides for 82 vehicles, 4 handicap spaces, and 3 buses. Lighting will be installed in our parking area, but it will only be used when the garden is open for special evening events. This plan indicates the area that's been designated for our overflow parking. It is in the right of way of Dominion Energy. We've already been in conversations with them, and our plans are already working towards accommodating the criteria that they have for using it in this manner. In addition, there are about 50 on-street parking spaces along the garden towards Charlottesville High School, and there are an additional 10 to 12 parking spaces along Melbourne Road on the other side of the John Warner Parkway. We started a conversation about a public bus stop near the garden with Charlottesville Area Transit several years ago. And we're looking for ways to collaborate with Jaunt for other ways to provide public transportation to the garden for events. At past events, we've shuttled guests to the garden from Charlottesville High School when it wasn't in session. And we plan to use this strategy in the future. Additional satellite parking areas could include K-Tech when it's not in session, Albemarle Square, and other locations. There will be a main pedestrian entrance along Melbourne Road, And in addition, there will be gates along the spur of the Ravenna Trail that runs along the sides of Charlottesville, of the Botanical Garden, to welcome visitors to the garden from the south. We also will be developing parking for bicycles in the next level of design of the garden. As Mr. Benish said, our hours of operation we're expecting will be from 9 to 6, with extended hours on either end of the day to accommodate special events. At this time, we anticipate 4 large events annually: a fall festival, a winter light display, a spring celebration, and summer exhibition. West Virginia Botanic Garden in Morgantown is very similar to our garden in that they do not charge admission fees, and they're located in a city with a university. They provided this information about the use of their site. They just started taking this, documenting this past year. And from May 12th to September 16th, this is the statistics they came up with during the busiest time of the year. So as I mentioned, the first garden that we plan to build is the Children's Discovery Garden. And here's a plan of what that garden looks like. And here are some precedent images of what that will be in that garden. Our main event green will be used for public events, seasonal celebrations, and performances and classes, as well as private events such as weddings and corporate functions.
So, Ms. Trishman Marks, I apologize. At the beginning, I should have told you that the rules we just adopted allocate 10 minutes for presentation.
Okay.
But if I can give you a couple of more minutes, you think you can make your most salient points?
I think I can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. Our amphitheater will be used in similar ways as the main event green. Our aquatics garden will be an attractive garden feature and an accessible outdoor classroom. Our tree canopy walk will include a bird blind as well as a sky viewing platform. If you've been around long enough, you'll remember that our site was the former leaf dump and mulch pile for the city of Charlottesville. We started stewarding the site in 2019, and by removing invasive plants, we've been able to create trails and gathering areas and offer free public classes and programs in areas such as the arts, literacy, and STEM, as well as and other science classes. We also offer our garden spaces to other groups to use for their programming for free. And of course, we couldn't do any of this without the support of our volunteers. And our volunteer corps actually doubled during the pandemic from around 200 to over 470. So that's basically what's been going on with the garden, the Botanical Garden of the Piedmont, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you and well done, well done. Any questions from the commission for the applicant? I can work from right to left. Mr. Murray, if you have a question.
Sure. First of all, it's a great project and I'm pleased to see how it's developing. Thank you for that report. The one question I had for you was about the parking lot. Have you considered in low impact development about using permeable paving and other ways to mitigate stormwater?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, may I go back to show you I'm really excited about our parking lot. So I'd love to show you more about it. So actually, the parking lot was redesigned as part of this new schematic plan. And what you see in the center is actually a rain garden. So all of the water from the parking lot will drain into this central area. It will be filtered and go under the garden, where it will also capture roof water from the buildings and then go through a series of waterfalls so that it can also be aerated. So that water will eventually either go to cisterns, but the idea is that we'll be able to recirculate that water. One of the things we're really excited about is being able to use the sound of water to mitigate the sound of traffic in this area. So we're thinking of the garden as a machine, as a way to use all of the different aspects of what needs to happen here to serve us in order to provide a more restful and enjoyable space.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Commissioner Murray? No? Any other questions from the commission?
Have a question and a comment. Can you zoom out so we can see the entrance to the parking, if you don't mind?
Sure. I can probably just go down here.
Right here.
Hold on, see.
So the parking area all falls within that county.
That
Property.
is a really good question.
Yeah,
And
not quite.
actually, that's not the case. Because let me go back here. So the old driveway is somewhere in this area right here. And the driveway entrance now was the old Melbourne Road, which is the dividing line between the city and the county. So actually, the entrance into the parking lot, because it has been moved from where it is now, is actually within the city and not the county. So some of the parking lot will actually fall within the city.
The site will also be subject to site plan approval. So, and I think it may be subject to site plan approval both in the city and the county. So,
Okay.
and I think Kevin was mentioning, I think this part of Melbourne Road is actually maintained by the city.
And I'm assuming VDOT would also review.
And VDOT and the city would comment on it. So just keep in mind, this is still conceptual, subject to their architectural and site planning.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to, it wasn't clear, but thank you for the clarification.
Mhm.
And then my comments in the lines of materiality. I know you don't have an architect yet but we have issues nearby, particularly McIntyre and I'm thinking of the ACAC. Or not the, I'm sorry, not the ACAC, but the
YMCA?
The YMCA, thank you. And there's been a lot of issues with bird strike. of
That's an
glass.
issue for- yeah.
So you had a beautiful image there of a lot of glass and timber and beautiful structure. Just if you look into some of the mitigations for bird strike glass, there's plenty of technology out there now that really works well. And for something like this, just put that out there for you to consider.
Thank you. That is a nice recommendation, and it was also included in our request for proposals when we sent it out to architecture firms that bird safety was part of our desire for this building, for these buildings.
Thank you.
So you mentioned, good evening, you mentioned that you'd been in conversation with Kat about getting a public spot there, spot there. So mentioning that you've been in conversation
Right.
did not say.
We don't know. And their response was, it's not a build it and they will come kind of scenario when you need a public bus stop. And so I actually found out today that the National Park Service program, the RTC, is actually going to provide us with 20 hours of support services this spring because nobody could tell me what I need to document in order to prove that I need a bus stop. I would have thought, kind of theoretically, that all of the evidence that has come out during the pandemic of how access to green space is so important to people, and that both physical and mental outcomes are improved by regular access to green space might be enough to prove the need for a bus stop, but unfortunately it's not. So we are going to, one of the things we're going to get as a part of this relationship with the National Park Service is a counter to start being able to document how many people are using the garden. But if there are other ways that you can suggest that we can start providing evidence to cats about the need for a public bus stop or the evidence that they need, I would certainly be open to that information.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I also appreciate the partnerships that you're creating. It is not unknown to my colleagues that I continue to be sort of gently annoyed that all of the green spaces in the county are drivable. None of them, except for one park in the district that I happen to represent, and that's the Charlotte Humphreys Park, can you walk to?
Mhm.
And so with all the excitement that we have about bike ped, you can't bike ped easily to any of the green spaces. And so I was hoping that this green space, which happens to be both in a developed area and in an interurban area, that we could facilitate people getting there without having to drive their vehicle, be it electric or not. And so I'm going on record saying yet again, for a community that claims to be this place of grace,
Mhm.
you can't get to any of those places for quiet solitude or meditation without driving a vehicle. And so I hope I'm sure that there are people who can help you advance that language with CAT.
I appreciate that.
The
Thank
other
you.
thing that I will share with you is that, is this anywhere connected to or I asked the question, is this connected to the project that was behind MACA? Because I believe at one point there was supposed to be a botanical garden there or something.
No,
like that.
not at
Okay.
all.
So I will compliment you on the board's taking its own initiative with public insight to decide to change the name.
Thank you.
But that is something that you hopefully came to in your own sort of wrestling about what is our presence here, given what you say this place is going to be. And so I'm thankful that you reached that point.
Thank you.
That's a good thing. And so my only other thing is that if we're going to get children there, how are we going to get them there?
And that has been an issue for us. We started offering a lot of our programming during the pandemic, and especially because public schools were remote, and now that they've started, many of them last year, the students were meeting in the classroom, but they weren't allowed to go on field trips. And this year so far, there has been issues because there aren't enough school bus drivers to get them. So the organizations that we've been working with are mostly those organizations that can provide their own transportation. And that's another reason why Jaunt and our organization are meeting and trying to find ways that we can get grants and other opportunities to provide transportation to get more students, children to the garden. We're also working with Wild Rock and to provide opportunities in the garden, because their facility is fantastic, but it's also really hard for them to get students out there. So yeah, we are doing as much as we can to, one of the things that happened is when we started the schematic plan phase, it was shortly after the events of August 2017. And the community and the board of directors felt very strongly that this be a place where people of all ages and backgrounds could come together, get to know one another, and heal the community. Well, in order to do that, we had to make the botanical garden be a place where people feel welcome now, not the day that the construction is open, but now, because we need their input into not just the features that we're building in the garden, but also the programming we're offering to the community. And in fact, the results of our schematic plan and our aspirations for it to be more than to serve the community in different ways than botanical gardens normally are seen to serve. We won a national award from the American Society of Landscape Architects because we've broken the archetype of what a botanical garden is. So that is why we've been working so hard to make connections in the community with other nonprofit organizations.
This seems like a really exciting project. I'll just offer one comment. And as you are selecting the design team, that you just push the envelope on the inclusivity piece. You know, particularly for those with disabilities, for example, and you started to touch on it in your presentation about being able to listen to the water kind of fall. So if you're blind, right, that would be great fulfillment to hear the water running. Like with that lens, to me, that's a great design. And this is a project that I think you already talked about inclusivity and being welcome for all, but push the envelope on that would be my only comment. So,
Thank you. Yes,
right.
and I have been meeting with the executive director of Bennett's Village, as well as VIA, as well as JABA and the center in order to make sure that this entire garden is not going to be a place that feels safe and welcoming to everyone, but we want to have a place that everyone feels safe and welcome. So that's our goal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, and we'll move on to public comment. No one has signed up officially, but is there anyone here in the audience who would like to come up to speak to this project? Okay, seeing no one rushing to the front, is there anyone online, Madam Clerk, who would like to speak to this project?
No, sir, there sure isn't.
Okay, well, with that, I believe we can close the public comment. And we can bring it in amongst ourselves for a discussion. Oh, so is everything okay, staff?
Yeah, I was just trying to get the recommendation up so
Oh,
you could
oh.
see it. That's all. I have no comments.
Is there any additional comments or discussion that we want to bring forth while we're bringing it back in-house?
I would just say for the public's benefit that this is not a site plan review. We're just here, our only charge here tonight is really to find whether it's in accordance with the comprehensive plan and the designation of parks and green systems. Our comprehensive plan is so old that, you know, this wasn't really in the works when we did it the last time. Had it been, I'm sure we would have wholeheartedly said, fabulous to have a botanic garden within the urban ring. So I'm certainly supportive of this. 5 million years ago, when I was on the Charlottesville Planning Commission, I also had a role in chairing the McIntyre master planning process. And we talked about some kind of botanic garden, some kind of place where people could go and have education. So it's been a long time coming and I'm really excited to see it. And I can't wait to frolic in the garden. Maybe I'll even pull some weeds if you ask me. So I'm kind of an avid gardener on the side. So thank you very much for that. And I look forward to being able to find this in accordance.
It's a great comment, great reminder of what we're voting on. Any other comments or discussion from the commission? Would any commissioner like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
The floor is
Um,
yours, sir.
We recommend that the commission find the location, character, and extent of the CCP 20220001 Botanical Garden of the Piedmont, public facility and public use thereof, as proposed to be in substantial accord with the comprehensive plan for the reasons identified as favorable factors in this staff report.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion passed unanimously. Thank you. And we'll move on to our next public hearing, which is SP 2022-00020 Esmont Scottsville Transmission Line. So as our staff is getting situated, we'll turn it over to them for our staff report.
All righty, good evening. I'm Scott Clark. I'm the county's Natural Resources Program Manager. And this item is regarding a special use permit for the Esmont Scottsville electrical transmission line. The location map here shows you the extent of this project, which is larger than most, reaches from Esmont in the west, where there's an existing substation, along the south side of Irish Road, Route 6, almost to Scottsville itself, where the Scottsville substation is located at the east end of this project. The proposal is to replace the existing power line support poles, which have a current average height of about 40 feet, with new poles, mainly H-shaped steel poles with an average height of about 60 feet, which will accommodate a new 46 kilovolt power line. And this is part of a larger reliability project. You all have already seen another piece of this, the Scottsville substation upgrade, which is in fact going to the board tomorrow. So this is a diagram of roughly the appearance of the existing poles in the corridor. And those would be replaced with new poles of a similar design, but made of a dulled galvanized steel material and of somewhat greater height, again, about 60 feet. A few, roughly 8 to 9 structures would use single poles just to allow the poles and the lines to stay within the existing rights of way. This is a photo simulation provided by the applicant showing the difference between the existing conditions at the top and the proposed new transmission poles at the bottom. And in summary, staff felt that there was no substantial detriment to surrounding properties due to replacement of poles in the same corridor, and that the character of the area would not be changed, again, by what are essentially one-to-one pole replacements. When it comes to scenic resources, there is some, but minimal visual impact because there are taller poles. However, they are quite a distance from the entrance corridor, and the visibility would be offset by the use of the new lighter colored dulled metal material. And as we've said before, with similar projects, there is some impact on the rural areas by creating utility corridors, but this is reusing an existing corridor, so there's minimal impact in that sense. Just look at visibility again. This is another photo simulation showing at the top the view of the existing poles from Route 6. And at the bottom, you can see that the new poles would in fact be taller and slightly more visible. We did extensive pre-application work sessions with the applicants, which they put a lot of work into, which I really appreciate. One of the options they considered originally was to do fewer poles, but that actually raised the height of the poles quite a bit and made them more visible because the poles that would be used would have emerged much higher above the skyline. So this turned out to be the better solution. So in summary, positive aspects would increase the reliability of electrical service, pole materials would minimize visual impacts, and using the existing corridor there rather than some new corridor avoids new land impacts in the rural areas. We have one condition that is recommended, and we have a slight update to that. There was some discussion after the staff report went out with the applicants. We originally thought that all of the new poles would be H-frames. It turns out that a small number will not be. So we have rephrased the condition to just refer to the fact that new transmission poles and other permanent structures, was clarifying that nothing temporary being done during construction would be affected, would need to be the steel with the dulled galvanized finish. And I'll be happy to take any questions, and I have some motions for you to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Commission, do we have any questions for staff? Start to my left, Mr. Bivens.
This is an entrance corridor question. So Route 6 is one of those roads?
Route 6, actually, I just learned today is not going to be on the entrance corridor list as it's being
So the-
vetted. It was considered one in the past.
At one pass, okay.
Yeah.
The reason I asked that is because then some of the concerns that were, I know everyone has visual concerns, but some of the higher standards that we sometimes apply to things that we see from the road don't apply here because this is not an entrance corridor. And then does this connect to that property that we saw on James River Road? Is this connecting to that project that we just saw on James
Yes,
River
that's
Road?
the east end of the project.
So
is
that's
that
the east end.
substation,
So this is sort of enhancing the lines to come to that. Or to join
Actually,
into that.
the bigger, higher voltage lines come in from the southwest into that substation.
Oh,
And this connects from the Scottsville station that I think receives, I'm gonna get the number wrong, but the applicants will know, a much higher voltage.
Okay.
And then this is a 46 kV line that will go to Esmont.
But this is continuing to do the work. I think if it's AEP, it's to continue to do the work in that
That's right.
part of the county.
Yeah, and that part of the state really,
in
it's a
that part of
regional.
this- Yeah,
reliability
that's trying to enhance what we have there.
Exactly.
And do we know if it goes forward, if the project we saw last week, the solar project, does this interact with that or does this?
I
not
don't believe so.
interact? Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Curzon? No? Oh, sorry.
I just have a couple questions. Thanks, Scott. Great report, really helpful. So one is you mentioned, and I was curious about the number of polls that you addressed that, said it's the same amount of polls.
Mhm.
There was an option to reduce the number of polls, but they would have been much higher.
Right.
How does that conversation happen? Is that between you and the applicant, or does the applicant come to you and say, here's what we're doing, and you say, let's try to reduce the polls? I'm just curious as to how that conversation goes.
It depends on the application. In this case,
Yeah.
the applicants came to us really early
Okay.
and hadn't committed to a particular design and were willing to go through options with us, which was really helpful.
Okay, good to know. And then this is a naive question. I should probably know the answer, but are there guidelines? Like it talks about get dull galvanized finishes. Does the county have guidelines that a utility provider can look at and follow to try to stay consistent somehow throughout the county?
Not that I'm aware of. It tends to depend a lot on the landscape context. So in this case where we've got a lot of open sky background to these
backlight.
lines, so the lighter poles make sense. In a more wooded context, we've had applicants propose the I want to call it rusty steel. I've forgotten the technical.
Like
term, but-
Cortend or
Yeah,
something like that? Yeah,
so it just, whichever one tends to blend in.
got it. Okay, thanks. That's my only question.
Questions on this side?
No, I attended an excellent public meeting about this. All my questions were answered.
All right. Well, thank you again, Mr. Clark. With that, we will open up the public hearing. And is there an applicant that would like to come forth for presentation? Welcome, and we look forward to the presentation. I just want to share that there's 10 minutes for the presentation. When you see the yellow light, which will come after the green light, it's just a gentle reminder to make your most salient points, and time will be coming to a close. So thank you. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Daniel Fraser with Power Engineers, engineering and environmental consultant representing Appalachian Power for the Esmont to Scottsville Transmission Line Rebuild Project and Special Use Permit 22-20. Thank you for this opportunity to present this project, and staff has already covered a good description of our project, which will involve rebuilding about 6 miles of the existing Esmont to Scottsville 69 kV line. So starting at Esmont substation on Route 6 and Scottsville substation on James River Road is the other end of the project. There also is a switch structure outside of Esmont substation that would also be replaced as part of this project. Again, part of the larger reliability project that the Appalachian Power has ongoing in the state. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the need for the project. Some of those key items, one being the age of the line. So this line was originally installed around 1925, so it is approaching its 100-year anniversary.
Wow.
And it is time to replace those poles, wires, hardware. So, obviously replacing 100-year-old equipment with modern equipment will enhance reliability for the county and the customers served from Esmont Substation. Also, the limitations of that existing line, given the wire size that was used in the 1920s, as well as the lack of shield wires is another key item. So adding shield wires protects from lightning strikes, and hopefully reduces the number of outages that circuit sees. So, by replacing the line with new modern infrastructure that will also accommodate future growth across the grid. And then to meet current electrical safety standards, for the public, meet designing to current standards, as well as Appalachian employees that maintain and operate the line. So I talk about, modern equipment, and you've seen these simulations already. On the top is the existing condition. I think this is from Langhorne Road. And then on the bottom, you see that H-frame structure is slightly taller, and that is to accommodate those shield wires, which provide shielding from lightning strikes and grounding for the transmission line. As Mr. Clark noted, generally H-frames will be the typical type of structure that is used. And then, 9 to 10 locations where different types of structures are needed, all tubular steel, similar to what you see. But they're used to keep buildings out of the right of way or turn an angle, things like that. All new permanent structures will have the dulled galvanized finish that you saw there. And you've also seen this drawing here, the cross section of the existing right of way on the left versus the proposed on the right. The project will primarily be rebuilt within the existing right of way. The easements vary somewhat based on when they were secured and the language within those, but generally it ranges from 80 to 100 feet. There also are a few easements that have been supplemented. There are a few areas where one key area where we do go outside into new right of way, but all of those easements have been secured with landowners. So we are, those have been secured. Looking at the line route a bit, Esmont Substation is to the left, top left, and Scottsville Substation, which we have been here before for that project is the bottom right of the screen here. The black line is the proposed route for the rebuild. And you can see it largely parallels Route 6, which is shown just to the north there. The portion I mentioned where new right-of-way was secured is right around Porter's Road, near the Yancey Community Center. There's several buildings that have developed around the existing line. So working with landowners and through the process, a few angle points were added to go around those buildings and keep them out of the right-of-way, and minimize the impact to the community that really has developed around the line there. There also are 2 BOF easements right around Esmont Substation. That's what the yellow marking is there. All of that work would be completed within the existing easements that are that Appalachian Power holds. And then the other item to note is that about 4 miles does cross through the Southern Albemarle Rural Historic District. So that is noted. And again, that district is a National Register of Historic Places listed, as you're well aware. So by rebuilding with similar structure types, they generally look the same, in generally the same location, we're minimizing those changes to the character of the district. Again, you've seen the simulation looking from Route 6, and you can see hopefully a minimal change in the structure and in the view from that visible area. So looking at when, the schedule here, where we've been and what we've done, this project has been in development on the Appalachian Power side for quite a few years. And we've been working closely with staff to come to the proposal we have today. One of the key items that I would hit on is that gathering public input is a critical part of Appalachian's process. So the project was announced to the public in 2020, which a few years ago, understandably, it was a virtual open house at that time. But since then, this past fall, we did do an in-person community meeting at Scottsville Library. to gather input from the public based on the proposed route as it's shown today. Pending approval and actually or securing all permits, construction would be expected to begin in 2024 and last through 2026. And so, just in summary, the project aligns with the goals of the comprehensive plan for adequate and safe electric service. It increases reliability by replacing structures that are nearly 100 years old and keeping them in generally the same location. And at the same time, minimizes impacts to the natural and human environments by largely using that existing right of way. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions that you have.
All right, thank you for an informative presentation. Is there any questions for the applicant? I'll start to my right.
Sure. Well, it's not affecting the approval of this. I know that a lot of our rare habitats in Albemarle County and elsewhere in the state often occur in right-of-ways. And so it's just as a comment that I'd hope to encourage you to use mowing whenever possible and to minimize herbicide use, because there are a lot of rare plant and animal communities that do occur in those right-of-ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we addressed it in the narrative. I didn't put it in the presentation, but there are a multitude of options out there that Appalachian Power employs when maintaining those right-of-ways, depending location specific and understanding the impacts that that does have on the natural environment.
I don't have any.
Yeah, just have a couple quick questions. First of all, we've seen you guys before. Obviously you come back, relatively frequently. And I'm curious with the reliability project that you've been referring to. It seems like this is kind of a comprehensive move on your part, right? You're sort of systematically going through and making these improvements. Is there a plan? I'm just trying to think, is there a way or a strategy that you all have considered to look at these as a larger grouping in terms of approvals that might facilitate or help you guys sort of move through the process more quickly? Just curious.
Yeah, so those are, those plans come with each project and as the need is identified.
Got it.
So, Appalachian Power and American Electric Power have a process by which they inspect maintain lines,
Yeah.
inspect them on a regular basis and identify needs for replacements, improvements like that. And so when those can be combined, absolutely, that is an approach that is very beneficial for us, for Appalachian Power, obviously.
And staff and us.
Right, on everyone's behalf. So the other portion of this project is the Central Virginia Transmission Reliability Project.
Yeah.
A large portion of that project was approved by the State Corporation Commission, again, grouping a large portion together. This piece being a lower voltage and within Albemarle County was selected for local approval. So when we have the option, yes, that is a process we would follow.
Great, good to know. And then one other question, and this is just a kind of a geeky question, but with the shield lines and the transmission lines, the shield lines are about 7 feet taller than the transmission lines. I guess you can't lower those shield lines. I assume that's an engineered distance.
Yes, correct. They talk about a shielding angle. So it's the angle measured from that top wire that's shielding down to the outermost phase of the conductors. So the angle increases as you lower those shield wires.
Yeah.
And the larger your angle, the more prone your line is to strikes.
Got it. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other on this side of the dais? No. I have one question. It's more for just my general knowledge. You had a slide that showed the proposed versus the existing. And I'm used to seeing these high voltage lines like out in the wilderness, right? So like in this image here is in a residential area. Just curious, how does maintenance work? Do you just kind of drive the truck up on the grass in between people's houses, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I guess I would say it probably depends on the type of maintenance. If it's planned maintenance and, I guess I'm saying leaving emergency situations out of it for restoration. In planned maintenance, the easements that are negotiated with landowners provide for access to the structures for maintenance purposes. And generally, I would say Appalachian Power works with landowners as much as possible to access the structures in a way that minimizes, right? So hopefully doesn't tear up the grass. So there are multiple options that can be used, whether that's wooden matting that's put down, or temporary stone roads, things like that. There are multiple options available to maintenance staff as they're trying to access these structures.
All right, thank you. If there's no other questions from the commission, we'll move to public comment. I do have one person who has signed up, Mr. Jeff Ray, if the individual. Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience like to make public comment on this proposal? Madam Clerk, is there anyone online that would like to make any comments?
No, sir, there is not.
All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing. And we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. Does anyone want to bring up any points they want to talk about further? Commissioner Bivens?
If the applicant were to come back up for a second, Chair, I had a question whether or not they're also running or using the towers to run either fiber or they make themselves available to cellular, given that that's an area where it's hard to get a signal, as the former chair will attest to.
So to the first question about fiber, there is generally fiber installed on Appalachian Power transmission lines that is used for purposes of communication within the electric grid and for operation of the grid, not for
commercial use. So not for
communication,
commercial use, okay.
public communication purposes. As far as cellular antennas, those are, they can be installed on transmission lines. And Appalachian Power does have a process by which communication carriers can work with the company to add communication antennas to existing structures.
Thank you. Very, very helpful. Okay. Any other commissioner have a point they want to bring up within this group?
What is the county procedure policy for adding those transmissions to the power towers? Oh,
You mean
sorry, I can't, let's see.
It's a question cell?
Yeah, what is the policy now if there's if a cell company wanted to add?
Like our council is ready.
Well, I don't know the specifics, but obviously they'd be subject to the personal wireless service facility ordinance, County Code 18-5.1.40, which dictates the various types of approval that are needed for additional wireless service facilities. I wish Mr. Fritz were here because he could give you a better answer than that. But I would just say that they'd be required to undergo separate review under the county wireless ordinance.
I'll just make a quick comment, just that it's a really important project. It's almost comical to hear how old those lines are. The one photo that you were just asking about when you're saying how would they get across the lawn? I mean, not that long ago, that actual location was a farm. Those houses have sprung up since then. And knew they were next to a transmission line. So
Okay.
I'm sure they're as appreciative of as reliable power as the rest of us. And I know that Scottsville in particular has been growing. I moved my tech company there 3 years ago, and it's really a need, to get away from unreliable power. So it's really important for the growth of that part of Southern Albemarle, and also with people having home-based businesses. I mean, if you don't have power after a while, you don't have internet because you get your surge protector and it lasts for a certain amount of time and your power back up and then that dies. So really looking forward to increasing the reliability of our power supply in Southern Albemarle.
Amen to that.
Well, would the commissioner from the Samuel Miller District like to make a motion?
Scottsville.
It's also in Scottsville.
Oh, that's right. And Scott.
I have one coming next.
I'm happy to make that.
All right.
Sure. So I know there were some amendments to the staff comments. So I will make the motion to recommend approval of SP 2022-20 for Esmont Scottsville Transmission Line Rebuild Project with the conditions outlined in the staff report and as amended.
Second,
Any further discussion? No, hearing none. Madam Clerk, can you call for the roll?
Yes. Yes, Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
and Mr. Bivens.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And the proposal will move on to the Board of Supervisors with the context of this conversation. So thank you. All right, and the last public hearing is SP 2022-00001 Misty Mountain Campground. Could we please have the staff report from Mr. Clark?
Here we go. Thank you again. This is a special use permit request for amendment of previous permits for a campground use located on Route 250, just west of the Crozet interchange on Interstate 64. And this aerial photo gives you a rough idea of the layout of the facility with 250 at the north end, the entrance road in the center. There's an open campground area and administrative area at the front, and then additional camping in the higher ground to the rear on the south side of Stockton Creek. The view that gives you more detail on the layout of the current campground and its surroundings. The proposal is to increase to 158 campsites over what's there now and 19 cabins as opposed to 16, and to change the existing conditions to allow year-round cabin use with a 30-day limit rather than prohibiting cabin use from November 15th to March 15th as the current conditions require. This is the conceptual plan for the special use permit use. It's a little hard to read at the scale, so I'll just show you various portions of it. At the front, there's the entrance area here, and the heavy dashed lines is the extent of work that would be done, including the addition of a commercial entrance, some additional parking, and a 3-lane entrance and registration area at the front to allow incoming vehicles to be next to each other for registration so they don't back up out toward the federal highway. This dash and dot line here is the edge of the 100-year floodplain, and Stockton Creek is here at the southern end of this view. You can see that there are some campsites in the floodplain. At the southwest corner of the property, there are existing campsites. The ones shown in the heavy dash here for the work to be done are ones that currently exist, but were found to be extending into the 25-foot side setback, so those will be moved inward slightly to make them compliant with the ordinance. There's also 3 additional cabins here on top of the 16 that exist now. And then at the southeastern corner is the largest area of expansion for the campground. And there's a loop road with RV or tent campsites in that area, some wooded areas to remain, some playgrounds, and also a couple of drain field and reserve areas for the septic fields for that new portion of the use. You can also see both here in the southeast corner and at the southwest corner, the applicants are proposing screening fences that would be added to the existing vegetation there to block visibility of this area of the use from the surrounding properties. So back in March, we had a community meeting. It was an online community meeting, and the attendees raised a few concerns, many of which were raised during the prior owner's operation of the campsite, including noise from unregulated camping groups late at night, trespassing by campers leaving the campground and walking around on adjacent properties, and concerns about visibility and groundwater impacts from the expansion of the use. The applicant took some time, about 5 months after that community meeting, to defer the application and revise and do some outreach to the nearby landowners. So for the current proposal, special use permit criteria, Looking at detriment to adjacent properties, the applicants have proposed screening fences between the uphill campground area and the adjacent properties and have already installed warning signs stating essentially that anyone found to be trespassing on the adjacent properties will be asked to leave and not continue camping. Regarding noise, we recommended a condition that we've used in other locations for large event uses, ensuring that the operation has a manager on site and that all of the nearby landowners have contact information so that they can reach the campground manager directly at any time to let them know if there's an issue about noise. Regarding that entrance, the applicants in doing the engineering on the site had found that it was likely to trigger the need for a left turn lane. But they were able to work with VDOT to get a design waiver by changing the internal design of the site to accommodate a lot of that traffic so that there wouldn't have to be changes to Route 250 itself. And I mentioned earlier the character of the redesigned entry area. Regarding the floodplain, the original SP prohibited campsites in the floodplain. Despite that, the previous owners and operators of the site placed tents and RV sites in the floodplain. So here on the north side of Stockton Creek, there are RV sites. On the south side, there's a few tent sites in a wooded area next to the creek. Staff's analysis was that while these sites are in the floodplain, sites in the floodplain are quite common in campgrounds around the state and around the region. These particular floodplain sites have easy egress to get out of the floodplain if there is a flood situation, so that it's not as if they're in a remote location where it would be difficult to get the equipment or the people out of the floodplain area. So that was not a significant concern for those sites to remain. However, just to avoid increasing the impacts, we did recommend that there be no further sites in the floodplain. So under consistency with the comprehensive plan, this is a rural area site that being a campground needs a rural location to exist and operate. The layout of the proposed site would minimize some impacts on the stream by locating any new development further from the stream. And of course, the new expanded camping area is at the opposite end of the property from the entrance corridor and is quite well shielded by trees. So it's not going to be a visual impact on Route 250. It is also located adjacent to a property that is in the Yellow Mountain Ag 4 district. That property meets this one at a corner at the northwest end on US 250. And again, the impacts are at the opposite end of the property. The Ag 4 Advisory Committee voted to find that this does not conflict with the purposes of the districts. So to summarize, the design and layout limits scenic impacts. Conceptual plan proposes an improved commercial entrance and road safety. And the Ag 4 district found that it did not conflict with that conservation program. Concerns related to the request include concerns with noise impacts and trespassing, but we've tried to address that with the fencing, the signage that the applicants voluntarily already placed, and the notification information. So we do recommend approval with these 4 conditions. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, and I know the applicants have additional information to go with their presentation.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Clark. Any questions for staff? I'll work to my left with Mr. Bivens and circle around the horseshoe.
Thank you, Chair. So just a point of clarification in your report there, if we could look on the first page, there is 47 acres and now 414. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Apologize for that.
Because like I thought, if that's what 414 looks like, I'm gonna buy me some of that. I can do something with that then. All right, but 47, I'll leave it alone. And so if you could, at one of your, oh, there it is. It's perfect.
If there's a particular portion you want to see, I can go to zoom in here.
It looked like on the southern boundary, you had a 35-foot setback. But on the eastern boundary, there was a 25-foot setback on one of the,
Right, side setback in the RA zoning district is 25, back is, rear is 35.
it's what on 35, what is it?
The rear is 35. In this case, the front's gonna be up on 250 where it's 75.
Okay, so why wouldn't the southern and the eastern be both 35? It just look on one of the, on the line gray, and maybe line gray can talk about that if they come to speak on this issue. But on one of the designs, it looked like that says 30, it does. It says 25 building restriction, and on the other one, it says 30, this is 35 building restriction. And just wondering why it's not, it's this one. Attachment 3C 2.0.
That's consistent with what the RA zoning district setback requirements are.
I guess my question is, why wouldn't it be the same? Why wouldn't it be both 35 and then give the eastern, because it seems like the house, the home is closest to the property as the eastern side. And that would give them at least 10 more feet of privacy plus a fence.
Right, and this setback isn't really part of the proposal. They're just reflecting what's already in the ordinance.
Oh, it's already there. Okay. Okay. And then my other comment is, if hopefully the applicant will tell us what type of fence, or is it like a snow fence, or is it cattle fence? So to have some idea whether or not it's fencing that's going to actually.
I believe the
provide
applicants are going to
privacy
address
to
that in their presentation.
And so they'll do that. And then if I understood it correctly, so the sites around Stockton Creek or River, I don't.
Stockton Creek.
A river or a creek? You live out there, is a river or a creek?
Says Creek.
The Stockton Creek, it's right
The
here.
Stockton Creek. So those are non-conforming uses right now.
Essentially, yeah, because there was a condition that there not be campsites in the floodplain.
And are we trying to correct that, or we're just saying because people have the ability to know that there's going to be rising water, that they can get themselves out of that condition?
Right, and those campsites were built in violation of that condition of the SP, but are already there and have been in operation for many years.
So we're
Just
going to let them be.
let them be,
basically.
yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on this side?
Commissioner Bivens covered most of my questions. In terms of the new, are these some new vegetation that you're showing here along the western side? And if you pull up the lower section.
There's quite a bit of vegetation along the edges here, and I think from what I understand of the applicant's plan here was to leave that vegetation in place and augment it with a fence at the southwest and southwest and southeast corners. But you're correct that here at the entrance and up here on this line where there's less vegetation, they would be adding some.
And on the southeast end?
The southeast end, they're gonna leave all that wooded vegetation in place, but augment it with a fence. Again, I think they have more to say about the design of that, what that fence would be.
Thank you.
I just had a couple quick questions. One was also about the fence actually, but also whether there would be clearing. I don't know if there was any discussion about clearing for the fence or if it's in
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear.
the fence line, the new screening fence, if there would be clearing to accommodate that.
I don't believe so, but I had some quick discussions with the applicants earlier today, and then it
Got it.
sounded like they were gonna talk more about that fence tonight, to clear some
Great.
of that up.
Great, thanks. And I know you raised a concern about water use and groundwater.
Some of the neighbors, just raised the general question, could there be an impact? And I believe the applicants have more information that they've recently received about groundwater.
Great. That's great. I'll save the rest of the applicants. Thanks.
Any questions on this side of the dais?
I just said, kind of tricky one. So I listened in on the public hearing and there were a lot of complaints. And it seemed like they mostly applied to the prior owners. Was that your sense that most of the complaints about operation, noise, trespass, failing septic system, et cetera, that was brought up, was from the prior owners, and that there's not been that,
That's what
those
I heard
issues
at
with the current.
community meeting, and occasionally just among, emails since then, was that a few years back, when the prior owners had the place, there was very little on-site management of, for example, tent camping groups that might have a party up in the woods at the southern end of the property might never be shut down for being far too noisy. So things like that were happening. There just didn't appear to be on-site management, but if I understood correctly from the community meeting, that was with the prior owner.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because I was really appalled at the amount of terrible shenanigans that went on there and how disruptive that site was. If it was the past owner coming tonight, I'd have to be a hard no. Because their management seemed to be atrocious.
I have to say, I'm not thrilled about the campsites remaining in the floodplain. And I don't know what can be done to improve that in terms of the stream health. I know, with the campsites right there, I know a lot of vegetation removal can occur and a lot of sediment can flow into that creek. So I don't know what can be done about that, but I'm not crazy about it.
Well, let's put a pin in that for our discussion here. Did you have any questions particularly for staff or?
Nope.
Okay. I did have one question. It was kind of follow up on Commissioner Firehawk's comment. Is there anything in the ordinance that kind of governs, I hate to say how noisy or loud a site can be, but is there something that can stop someone from saying I had 15 Bud Lights, it's 2 a.m, I want to play my music real loud, right? And if that's the case, yeah, how did that past events and activities be permitted to go on?
I think, we do have, the county has a sound ordinance, and I'll go ahead.
Right, the provisions of the county noise, there are two places in the county code that deal with noise. One is County Code Chapter 18, which is the zoning ordinance that deals with noise that's generated from particular land uses. But also in Chapter 7 of the county code is the nuisance chapter of the county code that deals with noise generally that's not associated with any particular land use. And to the extent that there were past complaints about noise being generated on this campground, obviously any complainants can call the county police, or again, if it's related to a particular land use, code compliance officers can go out and investigate that. So,
thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say, some of us are old enough to have tried to go to Woodstock. And so I'm just having this sense of what the people living around Yasser's farm might have thought at this point. Not that I'm saying that this particular location, which was once called Jellystone Park, would be the place that we would have sort of our own sort of revisiting of the Summer of Love. But I just think you should know that.
You make things fun. You do. If there's no other questions for staff, we can open the public hearing and go on to our applicant that's here. Applicant here.
As I did not preload.
Oh.
You need help.
Do you
from
need help
staff.
do you need tech help?
I don't think so, but.
Oh, all right, looks like you.
Thank you.
All right, looks like you're cooking now. So you'll have 10 minutes and it'll start off with the green light, and as it moves to yellow, that'll just mean that time is running out. And so you can judge your presentation about what points you want to make quickly when you see that yellow light. So, all right.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time this evening. My name is Kendra Moon. I work with Line and Grade. We're the civil engineers for this project. So Misty Mountain Camp Resort is located western Albemarle on Rockfish Gap Turnpike, just past Greenwood Grocery. It's obviously an existing campground, which is only allowed by special use permit in the rural areas. So currently there are 16 cabins, 105 campsites, 2 non-rentable dwelling units on site. And there are 4 prior special use permits associated with this site. The one that we are requesting amendment to tonight is from the 1994 special use permit. And this one, as Scott mentioned, allowed for 10 cabins, 112 campsites, and it required that the cabins not be used from mid-November to mid-March. And I think that was to prohibit people from living at the campground. So you'll note that while only 10 cabins were allowed, there are currently 16. Again, this was a previous owner built those cabins, but the current owner would like to rectify that and bring the site into compliance with the special use permit and zoning regulations. So I will refer to the campsites as lower and upper campsites. So shown in the top left corner are the lower campsites. They're nearest to Rockfish Gap Turnpike and they're topographically lower on the site. The upper campsites that are existing are amongst trees. They're not visible from the road. So the proposed use is still the same, but we're proposing to add cabins. So we have 19 cabins on site, 158 campsites, and the 2 dwelling units will remain. This is an increase in 3 cabins, 53 campsites. And we're also proposing that the cabins be used year round, but limited to not more than 30 nights per stay to still prohibit people from living at the campgrounds. So the proposed campsites will be upper campsites shown in the large circle. I guess I have my mouse here, I can point. They will also be amongst the trees, so kind of hidden, just like the existing ones in the lower left-hand corner are. And proposed cabins are shown here, 3 small cabins. Well, one more thing I'll note. This is a conceptual layout, so we have gotten survey back since this layout, and the campsites will shift subtly. We may compact the area, but still aiming for the same number of campsites. So for consistency with the comprehensive plan, the proposed use is consistent for many reasons I'll discuss, but the first of which is the preservation of natural resources. So the viability of this campground is dependent on a healthy environment full of life and nature. So it inherently shares the goal of preservation. These pictures are borrowed from Misty Mountain's website, where they advertise fishing and playing in the creek. Stockton Creek is an amenity to the campground and its health is important to them. So tree preservation is also an important consideration of the design. The campsites in the upper right-hand corner that I mentioned there amongst the trees are not visible. This is a drone image from Rockfish Gap facing the campsites. So our proposed campsites will be like the upper ones, not like the lower ones where trees are completely cleared. We did have trees located by a surveyor, significant size trees, so that we can try to optimize our design around them and preserve as many trees as possible. So this campground supports tourism in the area. It is frequented by both local and non-local people who are looking to immerse themselves in nature. It's a great place for people of all ages, but especially for children. Numerous stations are set up for them to play, including a jump pad, gem mining station, hiking trails, and a playground. Yeah. There will be minimal difference in traffic patterns. I have shown here the peak hour trips in the evening, which is the most peak hour trips compared to the morning. And there's only a 15, only an increase of 15 trips to the site in the peak hour. This is a 1.6% increase in peak hour traffic along Rockfish Gap Turnpike. The site is able to operate without public sanitary sewer. This is showing the upper campground area. We had Draper Aiden on site to locate 2 existing drain fields. For whatever reason, 2 drain fields were already installed but never used. So we hope to use these drain fields. One at least has already been permitted with VDH for 1,900 gallons per day, which is almost, it's like more than half of what we need for these new sites. So we're hoping to use those. And then shown in yellow here are areas where a soils expert has identified there's suitable soil for additional drain fields if we need. We find that the site, the proposed use on site is sustainable with the available groundwater. Wells have already been drilled and have a sufficient yield to support the use. There are water storage tanks on site that are used to reduce impact from peak demands. And we're going to propose water storage tanks in the upper campsites that are built as well. A study was conducted by Hydro-Geo Environmental to assess water availability within the watershed and whether the proposed increase of campsites will have an effect on the water availability. A large surplus in the watershed was found, and this proposed use, being as conservative as possible, they only found 0.1% decrease in the available water supply. So, and this was assuming that there were 6 people at every campsite and that each campsite used 180 gallons per day. So it was a very conservative estimate. We don't actually think that much water would be used. A major goal of the owner has been to minimize impacts on the adjacent neighbors. So as Scott mentioned, after the community meeting, we deferred and he took time to meet with the neighbors. And in some cases, even walked their site with them to literally see through their eyes, the campground. And we actually removed some of the proposed campsites along the southeastern edge of the property after he walked the site with a neighbor and said like, oh no, we shouldn't put campsites there. So he's very sensitive to the topics of privacy, noise, and light pollution and trespassing. So we're proposing screening fences in the southeastern and southwestern portion of the property. The screening fence, to answer your question, is 8 feet tall, solid wood, painted black. That we're proposing some screening vegetation in the lower campsite area and relocation of some campsites outside of the side setbacks to bring them into conformance. And no trespassing signs like the one shown has actually already been installed on site. And these let campers be aware that if they trespass, they will be removed from the campgrounds immediately and no longer allowed back in the future. So shown in orange are the screening fence locations. And then shown in blue are the campsites that will be moved, but they're not new campsites. And shown in green is the area of proposed vegetation, some evergreen, possibly cedar trees. And even though these are shielding existing campsites, but this was discussed with the neighbor of the property on the left, and he wanted some trees there, so we're proposing trees there. So that is all. I'll let you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? I'll start to my left with Commissioner Bivens, if you have any.
So thank you, Chair. So on page, page 4, where it has, you have a bullet point that says SP 2010-44, 5-year extension of SP 2009-16 to continue allowing an annual music festival. Has that been has that been lifted so that the property now may have an annual, or are we still in a 5-year chunk on? 5-year review every year, reviewing every year?
I believe the expiration date was just removed, but I'll double check that while we're talking.
Okay, so could not have, we may not be in that any longer. So they may have the ability to just have an annual event. Okay. This is for council. So with the agreement to limit this to 30-night stay. If I pick up and move up 29 or across the mountain over there at Waynesboro to do some shopping for the night and stay at a hotel, may I come back and have another 30 days?
I'm sorry, which condition are you referring to?
Well, so one of the conditions that I think we have is that people would not be able to be there long term. So they have 30-day turnarounds, so basically like I think we have our homestays. And so, but however, what I've been seeing in places where I've been traveling recently is that certainly nothing, I'm not trying to cast any dispersions on this particular applicant, but I've been seeing places where people have been bringing sort of fifth wheel RVs and they're living there and they're doing stuff, whether or not they're doing construction or if that's just because of life where they're living. And so wondering if I leave after 30 days, am I gone for 1 day and that I can return for another 30 days?
Well, technically that'd be correct. That basically, as long as it's interrupted by at least 1 day, then the 30-day stays would be separate.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted us, that's what we're talking about. So while the applicant's being good about you have a 30-day limit, it's really, you just need to go to Waynesboro and come back.
Can I make a comment on that really quick? Is that okay? Or I just would like to address that specific question.
If you state your name.
Sure. I'm Andrew Baldwin. I'm the current owner of Misty Mountain Campground and
Andrew who, sir?
Baldwin, BALDWIN, and my partner, John Pritzoff, is also here. I want to be very specific. Important question. Right now, we are primarily a seasonal campground, meaning it's mostly weekend warriors, if you will. And then everyone leaves on Monday and they come back on Thursday and they leave again on Monday. In the past, to help suffice economically speaking through the winter months in the upper campground, the previous owner was allowing people to stay there and even had some year round. We are a busy campground. It's a family campground. The first thing we decided when we bought the campground was that we no longer needed long-term stay. So we limited that to short-term because we wanted it to be a very transient campground. That said, right now, the lower park has people who are staying or planning to stay for roughly 30-day stints. Some may come and go. And that does help with an economic viability. So if there's a wording very specific to what we all collectively decide maybe should be considered or done, we're very open to that. We do want to keep that, obviously, that viability as the very slow months hit, because the campground operates on a pretty big budget. So when the slow season hits, it certainly helps. But anyway, as you can tell, we're not in a rush. We've been 5-6 months just planning to get to this point, and we're not in any rush to get past you tonight. So
okay. Thank you. That was helpful. But I just wanted us to understand that there is the ability to go away. So I was not trying to cast dispersion on the application, but just trying to give us a sense of what we were doing there. And are we sure now that they could do their 1 year?
Yeah, I checked the conditions of the 2010 SP approval and there is no expiration date on it.
There's no
So that's-
expiration, so you can
that's
have
fine.
you can bring me back to my summer flow once a year. Ms. Moon, could you give us, what are the non-rentable structures there for? What do they do? What is their purpose?
One is for the camp manager lives there.
So there's someone who lives on the property.
Mhm. And you can probably.
Oh, there are 2 people who live on the property.
2 full-time staff, the park manager and another staff member live full-time year-round. They're there 24/7.
There's one up here and one here.
Thank you, Chair.
The upper home was the original park owner's home. Was the one of the-
You'd have
Oh,
to speak
yeah,
to the
right.
mic, otherwise it doesn't get in the record.
Sorry.
There's no pitching, there's no pitching from the seat.
Just to clarify, the upper home, which the mouse is currently on, was the previous camp owner's home. He lived there, full time, which, probably had something to do with, awareness and, reaction to certain things that went on, without saying too much. And, the home in the front was, I believe, it was, the neighboring property was I believe a military hospital at one point.
Wow.
For the Civil War, and that home was what we believe to be an office to that. It is still an old, very original, cool structure that one of our employees lives in. And those are the two full-time staff members who live on site, so they are there all the time.
Got it. Thank you.
Got a couple of quick questions. Thanks for the presentation. You mentioned the screening fence, clarified that. That was great. Just to clarify, I guess you'll have to do some selective clearing, but you're not gonna clear like a big swath of install a fence. right?
No, currently, actually, one of the photos had a bamboo fence, which
Yes.
borders the Brody's farm. That fence is being removed and replaced with this very new
Got it.
8-foot screening fence. The other is basically replacing what's an old, Colin is actually in the crowd today. I spent a lot of time with him at his farm. There's an old barbed wire fence.
Yeah, right.
That were basically some hand clearing. Maybe a tree or two does need to be removed to get the fence in on obviously a straight line, but for the most part, we've got it to the point where we think that it's adequate, but I think you'll hear tonight from neighbors that maybe we need additional, which we're open to. We can go as far as we need to go with it. But that said, it should be very adequate for keeping anyone and everyone out.
Great. Yeah, sounds like it. 8
Yeah,
feet should. do the
we've heard
job.
some pretty crazy stories from years past from people leaving the campground,
I bet.
which we no longer will tolerate or allow and plan to mitigate it. So we have a very strict zero tolerance rule now. And we tell people when they check in, at least I hope every single person being checked in is told that if they do go off the camp property, they will be banned permanently with no return. So.
Got it. Thank you. And then only other one question is on traffic. It mentions the fact that you have a waiver from VDOT. But I had difficulty understanding how you're accommodating that on the interior. Is it that you have extra layers of stacking that you can accommodate for people exiting, or how does that work?
So, I'll address that in two ways. First, that's not necessarily why the waiver was approved or how that's just one way that we're trying to accommodate traffic to the site. Because we don't want the situation where multiple RVs are trying to check in on a busy Friday and backing up into the road. But the waiver was approved for other reasons because of impacts to neighboring properties if we were to put a turn lane in
Right,
and
the easements.
Stony Run, easements mostly.
Got it.
So, but we're proposing to improve the entrance with multiple lanes so that it's a little better flow in the entrance area. So people can pull up, kind of park there, run
Yeah.
out,
Side by
check
side.
in, go to their site. I
And
don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Right after we bought the campground is one of the things that stood out the most to me. We both live 2 miles from the campground. He's actually a mile or less. And there were times on Fridays where I was driving home where I noticed we'd have 3 or 4 RVs stacked waiting to turn in. And the problem was they were pulling up in front of the camp store, parking and getting out
Yeah, right,
with
got it.
disregard to traffic. We have signage now that requires you to pull up to a certain point so we can actually triple stack or quadruple stack
I got you.
to help mitigate that. But I think this plan will greatly help any potential future problem with that.
Yeah.
So.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful. Yes, sir.
All right, I'll go to my right.
So for the campsites that are non-conforming, that are in the floodplain, I understand you didn't put them there yourselves, but do you have any images showing the condition of the creek or the site there. I'm trying to understand how well or poorly vegetated it is right along that, in that floodplain, and how impactful or not impactful those campsites are.
Sure, sure. That's a great question. On the, what border, on the opposite side of 250 Creek, whatever border that is, it's only 10 campsites. There's no actual, it's just a couple dirt spots where people can camp. On the infrastructure side of the creek, on the 250 side of the creek, you know, these are gravel spots that kind of back up to the creek. And from what we can tell in 2 years of owning, or a year and a half roughly, is that it is the way that it's been for a long time. But we also have looked into stream restoration credits, further vegetation. But it is, you know, I would encourage any one of you to come out to the campground anytime you'd like and see that creek. It's very clean. It's very well cared for. We take a lot of time to maintain the creek edges, so on and so forth, and have even restored some of the old retaining wall and things that were along the pond that adjoins the creek. So that is our best natural asset to anyone who comes to the campground. So it's obviously something that we want to take very good care of. To answer your question, I think it's vegetated well, and but like anything, it can be improved. So we're certainly open to further mitigation or looks into that. So, you know, we're in a process of taking everything in. When we inherited this campground, there were obvious violations. There were obviously a lot of misconduct going on over the years, which we've heard the neighbor stories about. And so I said, let's take time. Let's take a year. Let's take 2 years. Let's get it conforming. Let's address those interior concerns first, then we can address neighbor concerns following, and then we can work towards a plan that really works for everybody. So like I said, we're open to really any and all suggestions at the moment.
Okay, we'll probably return to that in a minute. Did you want to also make a comment? Okay.
Yeah, there is one photo of the stream. I also want to clarify, we did meet with a consultant to ask if this would be a good candidate for stream restoration, and they actually advised us that it would not. So we did look into the possibility of stream restoration, but we don't think, because there's not like erosion or, you know, I think the best thing we could do is propose some more vegetation. We are proposing a few trees in this area, but this was more conceptual because we didn't have the tree survey at the time. So there may be more than 3 trees added, but that's just to show that we are proposing some trees. And this is a picture of Stockton Creek.
I will say beyond that picture heading downstream, unfortunately, as you all are well aware of, the ash borer beetle impact on the ash trees. We have lost a decent amount of ash trees in that area. So I think regardless of whether we talk about it today, our plan in the future would probably be to come back with some trees along the creek over time, as we have to remove certain destroyed ash trees, unfortunately, that are mature.
Yeah, I mean, I just be very brief. My background is in stream habitat restoration. That's what I'm professionally certified in.
Okay.
The thing is that I can see a lot of opportunity for fixing some of this creek in this very photo. I cannot design a creek restoration from the dais, nor is my intention. But because you have some non-conforming campsites, and this is a special use permit, which can be conditioned,
Yeah.
we might try to word something that asks you to take a look at adding additional vegetation, stabilizing vegetation along stream banks. And I understand it's a heavily visited site, it gets trampled. So you have to be considerate, but if you don't plant the next generation, those grandchildren trees, then you're going to see over time just continually losing more trees into that creek. And, so
Yeah.
I think some thought needs to be given to that before we conclude the meeting this evening.
Sure, and we'd be open, if you're aware of any consultants you would recommend to look into that, we'd be happy to discuss further. So.
Sure.
Yeah, just to dovetail on that, I mean, it's not just woody vegetation and trees, but also herbaceous native vegetation. And I see a lot of those areas are sort of mowed right to the edge of the stream.
Mm-hmm.
And so increasing the amount of native herbaceous vegetation in there, and also limiting, having some areas where people don't walk. next to the stream. So you have controlled access points to the stream and not everyone walking everywhere along the stream.
Sure.
So there's some things, and I mean, one suggestion that I would probably put forward is that, we do have some qualified staff that deal in erosion and sediment, and maybe, maybe we could craft some language of working with county staff on an appropriate plan to increase vegetation along that stream and improve.
And
that
I would
situation.
point out the South Bank, opposite that developed campground area is pretty well vegetated. The creek is fairly incised and probably has been since before there was a campground there. So the banks are kind of steep. But on the other hand, that does mean that even though those are floodplain sites, they're not likely to get flooded. Even despite being close to the creek, because the creek is lower, lower than the floodplain surface than it should be because of the degree to which it's incised. That said, I mean, yeah, we could try to talk about some sort of augmentation of the north bank where there are quite a few trees, but there could be some additional plantings there.
Mr. Murray, you good?
Yeah, that's it. The only other thing I'd say there too is, I mean, an obvious thing, but just be very careful with fertilizer on your site. If you don't have a nutrient management plan and you are using fertilizer, you might want to get one of those.
I just have one question operationally. I've not experienced it camping. I've heard of glamping. I might try that one day. I haven't done camping yet. Is there someone operationally who kind of walks around at night, like on night watch, to make sure everything's safe and good, secure, everybody's okay?
There is, yeah. So the on-site managers, one lives in the lower camp, so he's literally adjacent to everything going on in the campground. And then the upper camp manager, a gentleman named Darren Swedenborg and his wife Glenda live in that house. And they do cruise through the sites at night. We do, we're lights out and 10 o'clock kind of wind down for the sites. Not that people don't stay up a little bit later and sit around the campfire and all the things that you would want to enjoy as a camper. But for the most part, we try to really wind down. And I think with the exception of a few weekends, and obviously our one event a year, the Misty Mountain Music Festival, it's pretty quiet there after night. But again, I know years past have had different situations. They used to have cheap jamborees and all kinds of crazy things that went on. But we're pretty basic family campground now.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for answering all of our questions. And if we have no more up here, we'll take it to the public. And so I will call folks up 3 at a time. When you come, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and you'll see that green light pop on when your time starts. And as it moves to yellow, this means time is running down. So try to make your most pertinent points as quickly as possible there. So I'll also ask for some compassion if I mispronounce your name. We'll start with James Rovniak, Virginia Rovniak, and Colin Tillman.
Thank you. My name is James Rovnack. I live at 6861 Castleberry Court in the Samuel Miller Magisterial District. My home is directly opposite the array of some 50-odd new campsites in the plan. Functionally, this is an RV parking lot and motel. On page 7 of the plan, I strongly object to the characterization of impact on our property as minimal. This is after some vague words about screening. We will see and hear the comings and goings of campsite residents and can already see quite a lot. For example, we could see and hear the drilling of a well, which was not very far from our property line. The well lies inside this loop road. If you remember the picture on page 12 of the plan, there's a loop road that kind of outlines the new campsites. The well is inside that, meaning that the road itself is even closer to our property line. And we will have a fantastic view of the backside of the bathhouse, which is outside the loop and therefore still closer to our property line. I suppose that will be behind a screen. This does not in itself please me. There's much that we will see. The land rises above there. Screens will not cut out everything. So what we see and hear now will only be amplified when they start clearing trees and low growth to make room for the loop road and for all these campsite and these large RVs. We participated in the community meeting on March 29 and aired our concerns, and so did others. Some got attention, according to a memorandum dated September 19, responding to a request from staff on screening fences. In one case, at least, the owner states that he has met with each neighbor one-on-one and describes a resolution. We heard nothing between March and late December when we received a notice of this meeting. Our privacy is compromised by the plan, and I have safety concerns. A transient population will be able to see and hear our comings and goings when we turn the lights out at night to go to bed. Because of the topography, no screening can mitigate this. If somebody comes out and see, you would see over any screening fence in most locations. I urge rejection of the plan. This is unsuitable for the type of residential area that we have. If it goes forward minimally, I think that the woods that border Castleberry Court, that is the subdivision, should have a 6-foot chain link fence that would definitively set the boundary.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank
We'll
you.
have to move on. Thank you. All right. Virginia Rovniak.
Thank you for allowing us to speak. I'm Virginia Rovnack. I live at 6861 Castleberry Court. I'm married to James in the Samuel Miller District on property immediately adjacent to the Misty Mountain property. I do not approve of the addition of campsites and cabins to the property. On a busy weekend with an average occupancy of 2 people per campsite or cabin, there could be as many as 354 visitors on the property. I'm concerned about safety with that many people over there. Our house is out in the open. It's highly visible and easily seen from the campground. It would be very easy for someone in the campground to observe our activities and vandalize, rob, or assault us. My husband and I are in our 80s, and we are easy marks for someone with ill intent. Warning signs are not going to deter such a person. If the county allows this expansion, I ask the county to require a people-proof fence around the entire property. If an assailant or robber or vandal at the campground cannot come to us directly, but has to go out on 250, go around to Birches Creek Road, then up Castleberry Court, and then up our long driveway before reaching our house, well, that's not so inviting. Right now, there are places along our boundary and our neighbor's boundary where it is very easy to walk over quickly from the campground and walk back quickly. One time someone walked over in that way with a kitten that he'd found and wondered if it was ours. As I repeat, I want a people-proof fence around the entire property. I also have grave concerns about water supply. We have lived there for 24 years, and in that time there have been droughts. We were very careful about our water use and did not run out, but there are 2 of us on a well. If the campground is pumping out water for 350 people, we might run out next time. Who pays if an adjacent property makes us run dry? A high flow now does not mean there will be a high flow in a drought. I've seen Stockton Creek when the flow was about how much you would get from a small hose. In sum, I oppose the project for reasons of safety of person and property and for the drain on our water supply. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Colin Tillman.
Thank you for this time to let me speak. My name's Colin Tillman. I'm the property owner to the south of the campground. I'm the guy with all the stories about the people who have come over and trespassed on our property from the campground. We acquired it in 95 after a death family member. And we've gone through 3 owners. Andrew is by far the best. He has made changes and he's helped, but I need to tell you just a little brief about some stories that have happened to me from the campground, all of which have happened in the past since he's taken it over. I've had 2 trespassers and 1 drone pilot that had to come get his drone. So things are way better now, but I've gone through first in 95, the campground owner called the police on me for target practicing on my property. I've got a farm. I have cows. And I believe that the campground has a right to do their business. I've got a right to do mine. I should not have any of my business spill over on them. They should not have business spilling over on me. Just what I believe. Now, I've asked all 3 of the owners to create a situation where their business doesn't come on me. If my cows get out and they go over to campground, go over on a neighbor's property, I take care of it right away. But what has happened is that frequently the campers come over, they call the police on me for doing completely legal things. The cops come with the guns pointed at me. One time they came 6 deep with a dog. And because a camper had called on me, I had asked them to stop trespassing on me. They would not. One other time, crack party going on, and I know it was because I went over and looked at it, called the police at 11:30, 12:30, 1:30. They didn't come up to do anything because they had to get out of their car because they could get through the campground gate. And I think that's just atrocious. So what I have gone through in the last few years has become breaking points for me as a property owner. And now Andrew has done a much better job. After meeting with him, he made the first effort to put the signs up. There are not many of them, but they're there. And that, I think that has helped. But I think what should be done is, as the Roadhouse says, we should be able to keep our business on our side and their business on the other. And that I realize my time's expired, but if police show up with guns pointed at me again, then I'm right out of this county after 6 generations. And I don't think I deserve that.
Thank you, sir.
So please help me.
The next 2 are Kathy Hunt and Dan Hunt.
Hi, I'm Kathy Hunt, Samuel Miller District, and I live on Castleberry Court next to the Robniaks. And I just want to reinforce and ask for the same kind of safety precautions out of concern for us and for our neighbors who have experienced. They're a little bit closer to the site and I think have a little bit more, but we would also, if this has to go through, then ask for, as Virginia asked, the people-proof fencing. to keep people, everybody on their side and to keep us all safe. And also in regards to the fencing and the mention that people had been contacted and approved the fencing, we have not been had the opportunity to review any of the fencing plans or, what's available, where it's going to be. So we're a little confused about just how far it was supposed to go. We're on the, I guess, southwest side. So just would like an opportunity to be able to look at that and to review the plan a little closer at the website and just see how much vegetation is actually coming out for that. Thank you.
Go, thank you. Dan Hunt.
Hi, folks. My name is Dan Hunt. I live in Castleberry Court in the Samuel Miller District. And I'm an adjacent property owner to Misty Mountain. My involvement with this consists of a couple of notices that we got from the county, and I participated in the community meeting that was held back on March 29th. And during that meeting, I think what you've heard from some of the other property owners is we expressed a number of concerns that we had with the plan that was shown to us. And I went back and listened to that recording today just to refresh my memory. And some of the same issues that we raised back in March are still, as you probably heard tonight, are still open. Those issues have not been addressed. And I won't go through each of them because the other folks have done that. And so what we're going to ask tonight is that you defer action on this application and ask the county, direct the county to go back and do what they committed to do in that community meeting, which was to make sure that our issues are addressed before any plan is presented to this commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to this proposal? Madam Clerk, is there anyone online that would like to speak to this proposal?
Yes, I have one person, Ann Roll. Ann, please state your name and address, where you're located, and if you are affiliated with a group or organization, and your time starts when you start speaking. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Yes, my name is Anna Roll. I grew up in one of the adjacent properties, and my family lives on that property to this day. The address is 6867 Rockfish Gap Turnpike in Greenwood, Virginia. I'm not affiliated with any organization. Growing up on an adjacent property, I too remember the problems under the previous owner of the campground. And I appreciate this opportunity today. I do have some additional questions about the proposed screening fence. For one thing, just the appearance of it, the 8 feet made of wood sounds appealing, but I don't understand why painting it black. That seems like an odd choice when natural wood would look far better. And despite seeing the maps on the presentation, it does not appear that the screening fence is intended to be placed at all adjacent properties and residences adjoining the campground. I would think that surely near the entrance, with all the proposed increased activity, would be another place where a screening fence would be required. Just in general, concerns about the increased traffic. For one thing, would that also come with it a comparable increase in campfires and the smoke also drifting onto adjacent properties, in addition to the other, concerns that have been raised tonight. Also, the additional foot traffic with respect to Stockton Creek. I know that it's been talked about how that won't be impacted negatively by the proposal, and I understand that it is a shared goal with the current owner and the applicant to preserve the creek and the large trees on the property as one of the selling points of the campsite. However, I think it's an issue that's so important that it really bears fully fleshing out and rigorously studying and reviewing what the additional impacts of increased foot traffic, human activity, fishing would have on the natural resources. And thank you very much for the time and opportunity to speak.
Madam Clerk, just confirming there's no other individuals online wishing to speak.
There is no one else at this time.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
If the applicant so chooses, they will have 5 minutes to respond to anything that you have heard, if you so choose.
I'll just take an extra minute and say one last thing. Like I said, my partner and I, we live in Greenwood. My wife grew up there. She's born and raised there. I grew up in Charlottesville. I've been here my entire life. We want to do everything in our power to be the best neighbors that we can be. And to whatever extent that takes, we're willing to hear it and listen to it. I think it probably comes as a shock based on previous ownership and some of the stories we've heard. So I understand gaining trust takes time. So anyway, that said, we're here, we're listening, and we're happy to take anything into consideration. And like I said, we're not in a rush. So we're interested in the commission's feedback and certainly staff's as we move forward. Like Kendra said, we actually have taken the plan that you saw tonight and have condensed it further so that we can still create a larger screening natural buffer. That entire area where the proposed expansion is mature woods. This is not early new growth. These are 50-plus-year-old trees in a lot of instances. So we're going to do everything in our ability. There's currently an open space camp. If you look at the aerial photo, there's a lot of Boy Scout groups, et cetera, that use that space now, and we're really trying to enhance that. And like I said, just be good neighbors. So I'll close with that and appreciate the commission's time. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing. And I'm also going to use chair's privilege because I need to stretch my legs, and we're going to take a 6-minute recess if that sounds okay. So 6 minutes, that means we'll be back on the clock at 8:43. So thank you. All right, we will, Madam IT professional, we're good? Oh, okay. Welcome back. We have closed the public hearing and we're bringing it back to ourselves. I have jotted down a few things that I've heard that, as Commissioner Bivens would say, we need to wrestle with. I'll share those things and then the commission can happily add to those and we can decide how we want to wrestle these things to the ground and come to a conclusion. The things that I had jotted down was the 30 nights per stay. I had the floodplain and existing structures. And the way I phrased this last one was the vegetation feasibility, if you will, along the stream banks. Mm-hmm. And then just as an overarching kind of theme, like the volatility of the relationship between the campground and adjacent owners, it really goes like who's owning it. You know, we've had measures in place and it seems like they didn't really hold up. And so it really just depends on who is owning the campground. as just kind of an overarching kind of theme to it. So anything else you think we should add to this list as we start our discussion?
I would like to add the non-conforming tent sites in the floodplain.
Is it the same as the existing structures or?
Well, they're not really structures, they're tent
Gotcha.
pads.
Got you. I'll just change structures to tent pads.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
I guess this is kind of a detail, but the type of fence, the setbacks from the property boundary of the proposed sites would be things I'd like to talk about.
Okay.
Bathhouse was also brought up. And when I first looked at that illustration of the site plan, I wondered, you know, it's on the other side of the road, which makes it closer to the neighbors. I wondered if it could be flipped and go on the other side, away
Okay.
from the border.
Okay. All right. So that sounds like a pretty comprehensive discussion. So, and not that we have to take any of these in order, we can group some together. Otherwise, we might be here until midnight, and that's not our goal. We want to kind of come to a resolution. I might ask that if, you know, someone says something that you agree with, we can kind of just say, I +1 it. I don't think we have to kind of reiterate, you know, I agree with Commissioner Murray, for example. Let's start with the 30 nights per stay. Commissioner Bivens, I'll lead off with you. I know you brought that up.
Well, Chair, my piece on that was just to recognize that I'm not interested in denying that. Because under the homestay ordinance that the county has, that's available in other kinds of structures. So I'm not, you know, if they were, but let's sort of take it away that it's a campground. But if you or I wanted to go and come forward and do ARB, not ARB, I don't want to do ARB. I want to do Airbnb or something like that. Then part of my moving through that is that I can't do long-term housing in that. And so that feels sort of similar in type, but the difference here is that if someone's pulling a rig, and as I've mentioned, I've been places recently where I've seen that has been the housing option for people because there is no housing some places. And so people are using using campsites, not these type, they're using campsites as residents and not understanding whether or not a 30-day limit would actually, what really does that. When I say that, what kind of boundary or what type of conditions that's up keep Misty Mountain from becoming a residence or a residential community? Since that's not, I don't know what kind of language that is. I don't know if there's a possibility to craft some language there, but I just wanted to note that 30 days is something that is common among homestays. But yet the difference here is that you're bringing your home with you to stay if you're using an RV. So is there a way to sort of craft that so that we don't have people turning it into long-term housing, even in spite of what the owners are saying that they would prohibit that?
You know, one thing that occurs to me is a limit on the number of days per year per person.
I thought of that, but that you could just have like a different person saying, now it's Fred's
Yeah,
RV, now
yeah.
it's Ted's RV. It'd be pretty hard to
I don't know.
police that. I don't, when
And-
they were
and-
taking the reservation, you know.
I was just gonna add to that. I mean, I was having the same kind of thoughts in terms of, is there some limit? I mean, somebody would have to, under your scenario is that they're taking a day off and then they come back
Right,
the next, I mean, but they would have to book that
correct,
because they couldn't expect that would be on, I mean, people are gonna be booking this all the time, so.
correct.
So they would have to book that in advance.
Right.
So from a policy standpoint, it's a very simple thing to do, right? Not allowing multiple consecutive bookings. So perhaps there's some language that, you know, maybe council can help on that, but some language is saying, you know, no consecutive bookings. So you need more than just one day. You need a 30-day or a week between bookings.
And the only reason
be
I'm
a
bringing
simple-
that up is because I have, in my travels recently, I've remarked on the number of campsites that are evolving into home sites.
Right.
And I don't know if they were intentionally evolved to that, or if that's just, because it's just the way of the world right now. And so given that a number of these sites are not just cabins, but they're also bringing your RV with you, then that in fact is, you're like a turtle. You go where your house is, bring your house along with you.
Yeah, I think the point is well taken. I jotted down the same comment. So it sounds like we're moving towards some kind of language that just prevents this from becoming a residential neighborhood is what it sounds like, some kind of language in the conditions. If we move on to the next thing, unless someone else has something else they want to add on that particular topic.
Hopefully council can guide us on that for appropriate language, but.
Floodplain, existing tent pads, so.
Oh. The applicant's asking us for an increase in the number of units that can be utilized at the site. I didn't hear a compelling reason why we should allow the 10 sites that are not allowed in the floodplain to remain. The only argument I heard was because they're there already. I don't see, I think it was wise of the county originally not to allow them there. I think as for me, I would condition approval of this SUP on actually requiring those to be removed and remediate the site back to a natural state. So, because I don't think it sends the right message, not only for this site, but for other sites who may be out there as we speak, putting things in places they're not supposed to. The understanding that, well, the county will be fine with that because we'll come back and we'll say, well, they've been there a long time. Or it was that other owner that did that, not me. I'm a good owner and I'm not disparaging the current owners at all. I think they probably are way better from what I've heard than the past owners, but I still don't see why that's an argument just because it's there, that it should be allowed to stay. They're very important habitat and infiltration measures that are afforded by the floodplain. We also, with climate change, are seeing more flashy rainstorms. Water can come up quickly. We haven't heard anything about an upstream gauge that's regularly monitored to know if a flash flood is coming down. A couple people drowned out by Ivy in a creek that was wadable several years ago in a flash flood.
Yeah.
So, that you could skip across easily. So I don't see a compelling reason to do that. So that would be a important point for me, is to not actually allow those non-conforming tent sites to remain.
Others want to weigh in on that? Commissioner Murray, you had spoken at the very beginning on that, so.
I guess I'll just say ditto.
I have a question of clarity on that. Is it the campsites in the floodplain that we're talking about? Or
Right.
is there a setback from the creek that we would be okay with? Because it sounds like we're talking about a couple different things. One
It's a really
is,
good point, yeah. I
one
mean, I
is,
don't know exactly how far they are. I could get the scale out and try to determine that, but it looks like they're fairly close to the creek. It doesn't look like
Yeah,
they're
so that's-
outside the 100-foot wooded buffer.
that's kind of my point, I guess. The floodplain piece, right, is sort of a public health safety issue.
Yes.
And that's one issue. And then the other is the environment. Right. And just the fact that over the years, again, not to the fault of the applicant, but over the years, there's been erosion, there's been, there's basically no really stabilized stream channel, right? It's pretty rough. Destabilized. So I'm wondering if there would be a way, I guess what I'm not sure of is it our purview is not the right word, but concern that these campsites are existing in a floodplain? I mean, is it our job to police the floodplain and make sure that people?
But it is our concern now, Morrow County, because we currently don't allow people to put dwellings in 100-year floodplain. And we actually have more strict requirements than FEMA does. And
Yeah.
I'm very proud of our county for that.
That's
I
good
think
to
it's
know.
actually a bad idea
Mhm.
to dwell in the floodplain.
So these
um,
wouldn't be considered dwelling units, right? These would be considered.
No, they're habitating in it. And when you were sleeping in your tent
Right.
on the ground, you're actually, one could argue, less safe than if you were in a structure that was raised 1 foot above the flood prone elevation. So, you know,
So there's a large amount of, I mean, there are units, right?
Yeah.
There are a large amount of the sites are within the floodplain, large amount. Really? I can't, the one
I'm
I'm
looking
looking
at,
at.
I was
concept
looking at,
plan,
we can resolve that, but I was looking
But
at.
I think the issue before having to sort of come down and counter is that if you're going to say, if perhaps we can say that we're fine with the 158 or however many is they want, it's just that at the same time, they need to remove the ones which. are
Right,
100.
that's where I was going with that. Like if
Yeah, so I don't think
if you look at Stockton Creek, you could imagine that 35 through 28
maybe I'm looking.
look like they might be in the floodplain.
But you still give them the same number. You're just saying. that
Yeah,
they need
I'm
to
just
be-
saying you can creatively rearrange some 10 sites elsewhere on the site.
Yeah, I think maybe we're confused of because the concept plan shows quite a few sites from what I can tell.
I think staff has some,
Yeah,
Sites.
we just received a clarification from our zoning, our assistant zoning director.
Okay.
And I just wanted to point out that the tent sites that exist there now have not been determined to be non-conforming.
Oh.
That there were tent sites shown in there in the 94 SP. And the conditions of that SP actually stated no new tent sites could be recreated in the floodplain at that time. So there were some there, you know, whether or not they're exactly the same spots, it was a very
Okay.
vague plan, but I just wanted to confirm that
Thank you.
that those were in the 94 special use permit.
Okay. That helps.
right.
But then I guess the question is, how many were in the 94 plan versus how many there are now, and how many were like just added there? after-
Right. I mean, if they were
after-
approved in 94, I'm not going to go back and change that. But is it clear that there are no new 10 sites in the flood? Is that in compliance? I know there was the cabins that were put in the wrong place and some of those are being moved in the applicant's application.
Yes, sir.
Francis McCall, Deputy Zoning Administrator. It is not clear. The plan from 94 is there was no condition like there are today that had, this is concept plan and this is the location of these things. The condition didn't really specify an exact location. It wasn't even, well, I'd have to look at it again, but it was, it didn't say, you know, 36 or, you know, down in that area. It had a vague amount, and it's over time, as we know, and you've heard from the applicant, it's kind of things have happened over time that have just happened, and we don't really know about what they've actually done sometimes until we get what they want to do is do some improvements, and then we find how we can improve that and update to the extent we are able to without, I guess, moving on those previous approvals or changing what those previous approvals may have done. Because that's not really what they were asking in this particular case. They're asking to put most of them up in that upper area.
Okay, I was just trying to deal with things that might be non-conforming. When we update a site plan, the county usually goes in and says, oh, by the way, this screening was not here. That was supposed to be, we have to put that. This isn't, you know.
And to that extent, we found some things like that with some of those structure or some of the
Cabins.
campsites that were in the setback and
Right.
things like that, that we had them correct with these updates to the concept plan.
So in your opinion, they've already done all of the things they need to do to bring it into compliance with the prior approvals.
The special use permit that they're asking for right now will bring them into compliance with the zoning regulations, I believe. Other than, you know, with recreation like this, that is a actual permitted use in the floodplain. You
Mhm.
can apply and ask for that use in the floodplain. And we've actually done that before. And the board has actually said no, you know, for new campsites in the floodplain. That has happened in the past. And that was down on the James where there's a lot more potential, more than likely of.
Well, that was
large
also
amounts
by
of
some
water.
sites of 3 major derailments by and the
Right.
Naughty Rockfish River.
Right.
So this is not quite that volume of water. All right, well, I just wanted to clarify that. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Um,
I withdraw my concern on that score.
Okay. Let's kind of stay on a similar topic though, in terms of, environmental sustainability and so forth, vegetation feasibility along the stream. I think that was in the comments you want to bring up.
I would still say that it's a good idea. I mean, even if you don't change the number of campsites, I think, trying to get some better protection of that stream, if they're willing to do that would certainly be a valuable thing to do. It wouldn't cost them much. It wouldn't take in fact, for that matter, there's even programs out there that would pay for some of that. So,
Yeah, there's a Middle James Street Buffer Restoration Program has funding to provide free trees and labor to install new vegetation as well as landowner education. So that could actually be done almost at no cost. So there, but I don't think we can craft language to design that this evening. So
We could maybe
encourage
suggest-
the landowner
encourage
to
that they
pursue
look
that,
at it.
and
Yeah.
we could follow up with you
Sounds like
for
they
some
have
of that
already, so that-
grant information that's available.
And the board of supervisors would also have it in the record that we
Yeah.
discussed it as well.
But we do have something to point to. So we do have our biodiversity action plan, which sort of sets out, which has been adopted, passed by us, adopted by our supervisors. And so I do think there's a way to sort of craft some language that say, and as you, and the work that you're doing around the stream, or the work you're doing on the entire property, that you would refer to the actions or refer to the recommendations as laid out in the Albemarle County Biodiversity Plan. And in fact, take advantage of counsel from staff and from Virginia Department or whatever it's called.
Virginia Department of Forestry,
which we have.
has technical support. They're located here in Albemarle County.
Right, and they're located here in Albemarle County. So there's a way to sort of to reference an existing plan, suggest that be something that they consider as they sort of work through the development of whatever response they do there, which I think will get to some of the issues that perhaps Commissioner Murray is bringing up, and I know that.
Well, and a lot of times too, when people ask a civil engineer what they can do to do bioengineering on a stream bank, guess what? They don't know. That's not their expertise. And that's fine. That's fine. But if there may be other experts that need consulting in order to realize that actually there's quite a lot you could do with that stream. And to your point, to limit egress, and you can provide places where you want them to go and where you don't want people to go. I've even had some fun with planting on purpose prickly holly bushes in the places I didn't want them to walk. And it's vegetation, looks fine. It's not a fence, but it works. So there's a lot of techniques out there.
Commissioner Bivens, thank you for bringing up that plan. I haven't thumbed through that one yet, so thank you for bringing that up. And I think the last bucket that we talked about, this issue of privacy, right? The type of fencing, then we also do the bathhouse in there, but it's that screening element of it, right?
Yeah.
It's also screening and security, I think.
And security, that's right, that's right.
And noise.
That's right.
Right, so screening noise, yeah.
Yep,
They wanted a fence you couldn't easily hop over.
all right.
So I had a question, I don't know who this is for, I think it's the staff report. Yes, staff report refers to, under recommended actions, location of screening fences must be as shown on the conceptual plan. And then it refers to a date of 9/19/2022. I think it's the conceptual plan that was in the materials, but I didn't see a date on that plan. Oh, it's on the narrative. Okay, I didn't see it on the actual physical plan. And then the question that I had on that plan, and I'm looking at the concept plan, I think, is what the limits of the fence are, and are they defined clearly? Because it just says proposed screening fence, and it kind of shows the whole boundary. So I don't know if the applicant could share detail on that, or for the staff.
Make sure that as it goes before the supervisors, that it has to be, we can put a condition that
Right.
says that the fencing needs to be such, or they need to consider such that provides these kinds of things.
Right, I'm just wondering what,
Condition, as a condition.
yeah, understood. I'm wondering what the intent was of the applicant on this concept plan.
Yep, you can come to the front.
Yeah, so the drawings, it is a large scale, so it's hard to see actually, the fence is drawn in there. Where the arrows are pointing to are the extents of the fence.
Oh, so the ends of the arrows would be the ends of
Yes,
the fence.
mhm.
I see.
And I'd just like to point out during brief interaction with our concerned neighbors, that the couples that are in this crowd tonight are the closest to the campground and by far the most impacted.
Sure.
So we've got basically two neighbors left, I believe, to meet with on site, not only to see it from our angle, but their angle, to make sure we get that extent of that boundary fence to a place that makes sense. There is a massive amount of topography at some point
Yeah.
between that goes into a major gully,
Could
at which
see it,
point
yeah.
it kind of goes into no man's land, if you will. But the most important thing is obviously feeling safe. Currently it's proposed as an 8-foot solid wood painted, not that we have to paint it, we get all natural wood.
Right.
So that it fit into the woods. It obviously would be a treated lumber material to age well, but that is something that is obviously going to be tall, a
Yeah.
deterrent. And, you know, we don't want to put razor wire around the campground. It's a family campground, but we certainly want to make it as uninviting to climb over as possible.
Well, I think someone mentioned the option to do a chain link fence, which in my opinion is actually less. It's what?
It's easier to climb over.
Yeah, it's easier to climb over. Also doesn't have the
That's-
sound insulation process.
Yeah,
And you
I
can
mean,
cut it
eight
open.
foot, you've got to jump up, you've got to grab it, you've got to scale it, you've got to make a true effort. And I think if we even did, sharper pointed tops, so that was kind of deterred
Sure.
instead of a rounded, the entire front of the campground has a privacy fence in front of it, which is a rounded edge, 8-foot fence thing. And it's a solid screening wall. It's not like something you can slip through. It would
Right,
Literally
right.
require you to climb it.
So related to that and related to the question about the bathhouse, because I was going the same way, that sort of zone of new development.
Mhm.
How, I know that, this is a concept plan, right?
Yep.
How flexible is that to sort of move?
I think we actually have already put in the notes since we started talking to potentially flip the bath site to the interior side.
Yeah,
To
looks
get it
good,
away.
Like you could fit it.
Yep.
I also, just as an aside, I'm the founder of Bundoran Farm. I'm on the
yeah,
design committee
right.
and we have a dark sky policy, so I am very experienced in light bulbs, way more than I'd ever like to admit. So to create more of a dark sky environment, one of the things I love the most, and I'm sure Johnny can attest to, is walking outside and seeing the stars in Greenwood. And we certainly don't want to take that away from anybody else who lives there. So
Sure.
Um,
So I guess to my point is maybe more to be objective here. There's a 35-foot building restriction line, right? On one side and then the 25 on the other. You don't get close to the 25. You're probably more like 40 away from
the
that.
25 are existing sites, have been there forever.
Yeah,
And
understood.
we're moving those in. So we're pushing that border back and then putting a legitimate screening wall there on the Brody property. On the other side,
Yeah, no, I'm talking about, so you can't see it. I'm sorry.
On the east side.
Is that east? Yeah,
On the Castleberry side.
yeah.
in the new size 25, which we actually, the plan you're looking at, we're actually already looking at condensing that in tighter on the current open space to
So
get
that
even
was my-
further setback.
That was my question.
Because during the spring and the summer, when the vegetation's on, I think it's a really solid screening right now. But when it gets down to, let's say, 40 or 50 feet
Yeah.
in the winter months, that's when these other screening options and potentially coming in and doing some additional evergreens, if you will.
Yeah, okay.
I like cedars because they're native to the environment versus like a Leland cypress that grows fast but looks out of place, in my
So
opinion.
there is flexibility in the plan. There is flexibility to flip the bathhouse.
Correct.
Kind of tweak all those.
Correct.
I mean,
Correct.
yeah, spatially, it looks like you could take the little rectangle and move it. I don't know anything
Yeah.
about the soils.
And the whole edge.
Yeah.
I know there's
Yeah.
critical slopes, but it seems like there's room. in there.
Okay, so I think we can weed to that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just, so what I will say, I think, have we covered all the pertinent points that we think we want to?
So the language there is about as this goes forward to create, to look for opportunities to minimize impact on neighbors. May
Absolutely.
that be by moving structures as far away from the boundaries as possible and increasing the setbacks.
But I think with the bathhouse, that's the thing where there's doors slamming, people coming and going, taking an early morning shower or whatever. So that's one where it's an obvious one to me to say, to actually enumerate that it should be flipped to the other side of that loop.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's pretty simple. And that would give a nice thick buffer there. We don't, so yeah, we can still say those other guidance-y things, but I think when we can, we should be explicit.
So I think we've had some robust conversation, and I'm gonna see if the commissioner from the Samuel Miller District, where are you at on this?
Well, I would say having heard the efforts by the owners to try to make the site better for its neighbors, I am leaning in support of this at this time. I think we need to just craft some of those conditions that we've talked about, see if we can get them down into a concise language that will be legal and clear. So that's where I'm at.
I think we can give it a shot if staff can put the motion up, and we can see if it passes.
We just add a new condition 6 that the bathhouse relocated to the other side of the road from where it's currently shown. I don't know if someone's going to type that, or I'll just.
Just wondering if we ought to do this by writing conditions based on the plan, or if we ought to just try to get the plan. If you all provide guidance and we can get the plan fixed, either through, adding any conditions you do want to see, and then providing guidance to us on things that you think the board should see if it goes forward to them, or if we were to defer and bring it back to you all with the changes made on the plan, so that we don't have to fix the plan with the conditions.
Can I try something out on that? So if you were to say, for example, recommend the expansion of the southeast border or a setback boundary to create additional setback or buffer, you're saying that you would translate that into an actual drawing that would then go to the board as opposed to a condition?
Yeah, yeah,
That would be
we have done
that's
that
the
before,
condition.
where
That's the
condition,
Yeah,
we
that's,
have done that before. The commission has said, we recommend approval with this list of conditions,
Yeah.
but we also want to see the following changes to the plan.
oh, I see. Okay, well, so that would be a change to the plan and.
And that can either be done through
Yeah,
having the applicant defer and fix it and come back, or you can just provide that guidance and we can work with the applicant to
Yeah, I
make
don't-
those
I-
changes on the
I
plan
see.
before it goes to the board.
Yeah, we're really looking at an expansion of a use that requires a special use permit. And we are trying to add conditions to restrict the impacts of that expanded
right.
use. So we're still within our purview, but I don't think that we need to see a new plan. I
don't
think
think
we are trusting. If
That's
we
right.
can give the correct conditions so that it doesn't come off as, it would be nice if,
No.
I want it to be, it's required that. So that's the question.
I don't know whether the commission would like to take maybe another 5-minute break in order to allow staff to huddle. I mean, if you're looking for specific language tonight, for my part, I've been typing up some as you've been going, and I'd be happy to confer with Mr. Clark and Mr.
Useful than watching us try to write live.
Right. So, and I just haven't been able to communicate with Mr. Clark across the dais here, but I'd be happy to do that if the commission would like to be in recess or for another 5 minutes or so.
Sure, we'll take a recess for 5. Okay, all right, I'll call this meeting back to order and council.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the indulgence and for allowing us a few minutes to discuss. What I was doing during the last session when you all were discussing this was just drafting what I was hearing you to say. And then I want to share it with staff and I think it remains staff's recommendation that these issues that we've heard be addressed with an amended conceptual plan. But at the same time, we also want to give you all the option of looking at proposed conditions, and that's what we've drafted. The one regarding when they're put up on the screen, there's a condition regarding fencing that Mr. Clark may have more to say about, but I know that staff isn't necessarily recommending sort of a monolithic fence. But in any event, conditions 5, 6, and 7 are drafts of what I've understood the commission to be requesting.
So council, for number 5, that blank in front of days, would that be the expectation that we say 14 days or 30 days? Or is that something that can be more prescriptive in terms of we don't want people living there?
Well, that the condition number 5 is intended to address the concern, I guess, initially raised by Mr. Bivens, that somebody might go for 30 days, leave for a day, come for 30 days, leave for a day. And so if there's a sense that you can't prohibit necessarily somebody from doing that on additional stays, but cumulatively, if the commission believes that in order to prevent this from becoming a full-time residence for anybody, this would be one way of doing it, which would be for the commission to specify a certain number of days per year that any one individual might be allowed to stay there.
Okay, thank you. So, we have a sense for what that number might be.
180.
How many did you say?
180.
6 months.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm fine with that. Yeah. I'm fine with that.
While number 6 is accurate, it's very inaccurate in the sense that the way that it is worded would basically make us put a privacy fence around the entire 50 acres, which would be a mistake, not only from a just disturbing land aspect, but you're getting into areas of woods which literally have no one for.
Sir, we're actually in our session right now.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, though, I had the same concern that adding fencing along that length of boundary is going to lead to a lot of vegetation disturbance. A lot of we were attempting, and I understand the neighbors' concerns very well, but the original idea, I think, was to minimize loss of existing vegetation. So that length of fence, especially on some of the slopes close to the river, is going to cause a lot of disturbance.
Yeah, the other thing that strikes me is that we actually don't want to prohibit wildlife movement along the entire perimeter of this wooded property. And
groundhogs will go under, but the deer won't.
What about our friends, the bears?
Is there a way, sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, perhaps it's a matter of stating that that you build the fencing along areas identified by staff as a critical separation area, visual separations from neighboring properties. So perhaps there's a way that you can identify areas that are
I think it would be challenging to do this.
I like that. That's permissible.
I think it would be challenging to do that by words in a condition thrown together tonight. But on the other hand, if the applicants are able to amend the plan
well, that's
to
what I'm
show,
saying. They have to work with you guys.
Right.
So it's,
Right.
it's
So if we do that by
you guys
guidance
are
instead of a
basically
condition.
dictating, this is the critical area that you need to fence.
Well, and it's almost identified on the current plan, in my opinion, because the area that's,
But it's hard for us to know that, right?
It is. I'm just in general, if to give staff guidance, maybe. It seems like the areas here that
More residents here, they're not sure.
residents here,
Up here.
yeah, but not campsites. So I would think the screening would want to be in that corner.
Remember that the residents who are not necessarily adjacent to where the campsites are, there's this concern and the sense that they're vulnerable. So I think if we're talking from a security standpoint, that
Oh, I
that
see.
may be
People walking
where that
around.
may
the
be
fence.
the place that you sort of work with staff and the applicant, work with the owners and
Yeah.
sort of talk about how can we
Got
how
it.
can we
Beyond just
increase,
the screening
you know,
piece. Yeah. I got
without
you.
having to block the bears
like
and the
that.
wild turkeys and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, you want to make it just inconvenient enough that the casual person is not going to make the effort to walk the
Mhm.
entire length of the fence to try to get around it. I mean, I understand there's been bad actors in the campsite in the past, so maybe some unscrupulous characters have stayed there. But in my experience with camping and campsites, I don't tend to find that people go there to rob your television set from the neighbor next door. I mean, I'm just saying, it's just not generally a place where criminals go to stake out the neighbors. It's kind of a foolish model because everyone's seen you come in and go. They have your registration information, your license number. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. But that random person who's just wandering through the woods who, you know, goes across where they shouldn't, I feel like the fencing could be made long enough, the signage and the no tolerance policy.
So and just to take this to kind of an extreme, I guess, a question that I'm having a hard time getting my head around is not the buffer, is not the noise, it's not the sound. Those are all relatively easy things. It's this protection, right? This feeling of safety. And I don't want to diminish that because I would also want that. But we also have approved subdivisions and commercial areas and retail and residential, and we don't require, I mean, there could be people in those developments that could, you know, be an adverse security risk to adjacent landowners, and we're not fencing them off.
Right.
In fact, I don't think we'd want to do that. I mean, it'd be terrible to have all our subdivisions fenced off from everyone else. So I think what I'm having trouble seeing is, how do we do that here? To your point,
Right.
right? It's almost like you're profiling the user of a campground. I think, I don't know, is it the density that's causing us to
Well,
think that, or?
Yeah, well, I think, look, I've done a lot of camping and everybody knows, like, say, that campground is where the ne'er-do-wells go because they know they can get drunk all night and misbehave and no one's going to do anything.
Yeah.
As this campground enforces more and becomes known as a family-friendly campground where that behavior is not welcome,
Right.
those folks will self-select out. You know, or the first time they get kicked out and never allowed to come back. So I think that
Right.
over time, the reputation and the behavior of that campground is going to naturally change. You know, but I do think that it's difficult to craft the language of the fence from the dais. I just think that's really hard for us to write a piece of code that can, you know, from here.
Sure.
So maybe it becomes more of a recommendation to make every effort to put the fences in the places that are most appropriate for screening and privacy and preventing trespass. And leave it to the applicant, staff and the neighbors to come to a better, maybe an improved design from whatever's here now.
So I believe you had started a motion. I think there is a motion on the floor and we were crafting the conditions. Is that right, council? There wasn't a motion on the floor?
I don't recall there being a standing motion.
We're just trying to get the conditions right so we can.
Okay.
So did you guys feel okay with the 180 days?
There was consensus.
Okay, so you could
yes.
type that in. And then for the number 6 doesn't become a condition, it becomes a recommendation.
Recommendation, right?
Right, that's what I just said, if somebody,
Mhm.
staff, the applicant work with the neighbors to determine appropriate locations for screening and privacy security fencing. Preferably before the Board of Supervisors hearing, so that they can judge that that has been taken care of.
So I know everybody wants to go home. I just have to ask a question. How is the planning commission, are we coming up with a 180-day number? So if I'm
I just took 6 times 30.
6 times 30? So you
that's
basically,
half a year.
Yeah.
so you just picked a half a year?
Yeah, I just thought, you know, that's Because I could imagine somebody comes back in May and they
Sure.
camp out for 2 weeks and then they want to come back in July. And maybe, oh, they're going to come back in the fall and go to some football games. And, I didn't want to make it so draconian that you couldn't visit our county frequently, but that it wouldn't be a place that you would establish a permanent abode.
And Mr. Missler, I might add that one's residence is established by where one lives, more than one half of the year. So it makes sense if the limitation is for this to not become anybody's residence, that they be limited to less than half the year of staying there.
Thank you. That makes sense. Okay, thanks. I just want.
Sure.
Is that okay?
There was some logic there, yeah. Okay. So just completely pulled out of it.
It was this here, like this.
All right, and then the buffer adjacency, I can't, it's hard to look at the scale with zooming in and out on my tablet. So how,
You mean on the bathhouse?
but, well, yeah, because it's.
Are we really just saying, put the bathhouse in a location that does not?
Can we say like maximum,
Right,
you know?
this is- I mean, it
They're
doesn't-
inbound or
Right,
something.
Right.
I don't know if it needs to be feet, but you're just saying to put it over here and not over there. On the interior.
But isn't the salient point that it not be located within a certain distance of an adjacent property?
Right, wherever they end up putting it. So what I'm trying to figure out is the scale at which we need to write that number. Because I can't,
Oh, there it is, there it is. There it is.
I mean, because the bathroom's
their
here. they
scale
said they could
ruler on
flip
them.
it.
All right. So that's
Well, there's
Yeah,
setback
that's
is
maybe
25,
50
so
feet.
Right.
50.
That's 50 feet.
No, it's more like 75. That's about 75 feet into the property,
okay,
roughly.
that works.
150.
So if you want to make it
100,
100, 150, I don't know.
bring my scale ruler.
Looks like 150 would move it on the inside of that.
It
square
would.
Put it on the inside.
That's
over there.
that was the,
That's-
And that's.
okay, let's
that's
just
where
do
you
that.
want it.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. Okay. I think that does it.
Is there any desire on anybody's part to recommend expansion of the southeast buffer? If possible, since it sounds like there's flexibility on the concept plan to,
Well, yeah, the
I think the
applicant
word-
said there was.
they use the word condense, I think.
You can add that to the guidance at the end if you, to,
I think, was
maybe
it,
make the new campground layout more compact to increase.
Does it, that does it.
Okay,
right, because we're not sitting here with engine. Sign, it gets tricky. It might be some weird thing, some boulder or
I mean,
something.
it could be more compact and still at the same distance from the adjacent property boundary.
Yeah,
My point was, do we want to ask for more of a buffer? So yes, compact it. But do we want to ask for more of a buffer between those boundaries to help with adjacencies? So if it's 35 feet, do you kick it up to 60?
600, but I mean, I don't.
like at the bottom part of the camp, the cabins and the top part, I start to see some steep slopes coming in there.
I know, that's exactly right.
So, it's hard to say like move them all because
I think
Yeah.
this works. This works. I think
Yeah,
that.
be careful not to
language-
design
I think that language
Yeah.
will get
Yeah,
Yeah.
to where
this
it's.
is good.
right, because we might cause other problems and they'll have to come back for a steep slope waiver.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, we've had our fun.
So I think we're at a point, if you, does anybody want to make a motion?
Make a motion since it's my district, I'll take the. Those are all the conditions. Can you open? I can get to the suggestion motion from the staff and then add those.
Aaron,
On your
it's up.
screen.
It's up. Look to the screen next to you.
Matter now.
It's there. Look on the screen, it's there.
All right. Based on the findings, described in this report and the factors identified as favorable, I recommend approval of special use permit application SB 2022-0001 with the conditions as outlined by the planning commission this evening. Those are, do I need to read them out if you want to call them?
Maybe you can say as amended.
Items 1 through, conditions 1 through 6, and the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. That's adequate, or do you want me to read that?
So if you could go ahead and read how staff is to work with the applicants as part of the planning commission's recommendation, I think that'd be helpful.
So the motion includes conditions 1 through 6 as outlined on the screen. In addition, the planning commission recommends staff work with the applicants to determine the appropriate locations for screening and security fencing and to make the new campground layout more compact to increase its visual buffer before the Board of Supervisors hearing occurs. Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? All right, hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Yes. Yes, I can, but please make sure you all are speaking into the mics real good because I'm having when you do a lot of discussion back and forth, I can't hear it as good, and I'm not sure how well it's picking up on the recording either. Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so to the applicant, thank you. You've heard our discussion and recommendations, and that will help prepare you as you move forward to the board. And I want to thank the public for sharing their perspectives as it has shaped our discussion. So thank you.
Thanks. See you all.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we'll move on to committee reports at the top of the year. Any committee reports?
We had a CAC meeting last night and we met our new CAC person.
If you could take conversations outside, that'd be most helpful. Thank you.
And we met our new community connector last night. And so it's a new era. We're going back and so those of you who sit on CACs, you will have a new community connector who comes to your meetings and helps to facilitate what you're. Yeah. So it's no longer, the role is no longer connected to community development. It's now connected to communications.
Our CAPE department, communications and public engagement department.
And so, so that was we had an organizational meeting. We also dealt with remote meetings, of which we're allowed to have 3 a year. CACs are allowed to have 3 remote meetings a year. And so just so that you're aware of that. Otherwise, it was a good.
That has to do with the legislature.
I know that. I do know that. We're at tier 3 and this is a tier 1. Please help me.
That's making stuff up. I think he's done with this report.
I'm done with my.
Okay. Any other reports? No? All right, hearing none. Old business or new business at the top of the year? Guess it would be new business.
I have old business.
He's living in the past.
But I will quickly move to new business. So those of you who may have seen the final ARB action memo from January 3rd, 2023 may have been as perplexed by action item number 8A, where the ARB said countywide certificate of appropriateness for RIO 29 form-based code design criteria. In my reading of that, it sounded like our RIO 29 form-based code was now appropriate for the entire county. And so I emailed our director to say, could you please tell me what happened there? Because while that's helpful, that I don't believe is what we thought we were doing when we did the RIO 29.
Yeah.
So that I asked him that question.
And I'm happy to respond. Thank you. So the title is a little bit of a misnomer. The idea of a countywide certificate of appropriateness means that it basically falls into a category of ARB approvals that do not require to go before the ARB. So there's certain administrative approvals that are allowed through applications to ARB. And in this case, when in the areas, actually, there's only one area currently, of course, Rio 29 area where we allow a form-based code overlay. If a project comes in that is adjacent to the entrance corridor that would have normally gone through the review period or review of ARB, that can be administratively approved as long as it meets certain design criteria that has been approved. So this action actually approved the design criteria. That design criteria is actually already in the code under the form-based code, under the form-based code overlay. So this allows only the one review for a form-based code project, even though it may be in the entrance corridor. They just meet the conditions that are outlined for our form-based code overlay.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Anything else? No. All right. Items for follow-up, which unless I'm missing something, I ask staff, is there anything we need to follow up on? First meeting of the year?
No, I don't think we have any follow-ups. And the board hasn't had any real meetings that have come up since the last time we met, although they had their organizational meeting and another meeting where there are no public hearings related to our work. But I will point out that there will be a meeting tomorrow for the Board of Supervisors, and the Albemarle County comprehensive plan update is on the agenda for an informational hearing or work session, and they'll be talking about what we'll be doing over the next year, which is phase 2 of AC 44, including the public engagement, is talking about the working groups and what they're going to be working on. So I encourage you all to listen in, and we can talk about that more at the next Planning Commission meeting if you want an update.
Great. Sounds great. Absolutely. With that being said, is there a motion to adjourn until Tuesday, January 24th, 2023?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Meeting is adjourned.
Bang your gavel,
I was
man.
gonna say, you don't have to call the roll or anything. This meeting is adjourned. All right.
Thanks.
All right.